Hey, everybody. Welcome. Glad you're here with me tonight. We're going to have yet another great late night conversation. So let's go. Let's do our thing. Let's have yet another great late night chat. I will put on the opening music and we'll go from there. So, yeah, I'm really glad to be here with all of you as I always am. Doing these streams is great and you all are great and we're going to talk about some important issues here tonight. So, thank you for being here.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just it's a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad to be here with you all tonight, and we're going to talk about important things. Quick reminder, we're just going to follow our normal format. First, my opening remarks, then the roll call, and then I answer your questions for the remainder of the night. So if there's something that you would like me to talk about in the second half of the show, go to buymeacoffee.com/CalebMoppin and send your question. And you can talk a long time. You can be anonymous if you want. It's a great way to do it. In terms of announcements, we're hitting the streets. Center for Political Innovation is hitting the streets this weekend, Saturday, to say no war against Iran. So keep your eyes out for that. We're not having a meeting this week. We're just hitting the streets. It's going to be a national day of action in many different cities. Exciting plans are in the works. Join the Center for Political Innovation. We're trying to stop the danger of a new war. I guess that's really all I've got for announcements. So as I said before, first, I give my opening remarks, then I do the roll call, and then I answer your questions. So if you have something for the second half of the show, go to buymeacoffee.com/CalebMoppin and send your question. You can also do Rumble Rants. You can also cash at me at CalebMoppin22. All right. I've often said on these streams that there is a thinking stuff from which all things are made, that the universe, both material and spiritual, is all one substance. And that what makes humanity special, and unlike any other creature, unlike the animals, unlike the plants, unlike the fungi, is that humanity has the ability to shift and manipulate his thought. Man is unlike any other species in that man forces the environment to serve him. He does not merely interact with his environment, and he has the ability to consciously decide and alter the environment around him. Any species that exists, any plant, any animal, they will naturally seek pleasure. They will naturally avoid pain. They will go in a certain way when prompted and stimulated to go that way. They will go in another way when prompted and stimulated to go that way. But mankind, humanity, human beings are the only species that has the ability to step back and say, where am I? What am I doing? Where am I going? Why is this happening? No other species has that ability. And because no other species has that ability, and because the other species are living biologically and on autopilot, they don't innovate. Ants have been making their ant colonies, their ant farms the same way for thousands of years. They've never stopped and thought, gee, we could make our ant colony differently. No, they just keep doing it. And beavers have been making their beaver dams the same way for thousands of years. And they never stopped and said, gee, we could. No, they don't. They just keep going. And bees have been making their beehives the same way for thousands of years. No bee has ever stopped and said, by golly, we could do it this way. No, it doesn't happen. Because there's not a part of them that would do that. They don't have a soul. They don't have a consciousness, a being. But human beings are the thinking creature through which the thinking stuff that all the universe is made flows. And they have the ability to activate that thinking stuff. And thus, they can connect to higher forces. They can think. Mankind can think. And with its ability to think, it can reinvent its relationship with nature. This is what defines humanity. No other species is capable of reinventing its relationship with nature the way mankind does. You think just 7,000 or 8,000 years ago, we were hunter-gatherers, living in caves, living in the woods, in tribes of 20 to 30. We didn't live much longer than 25, 30 years old. Life expectancy was very low. But we started to think. And as we started to think, we got better at hunting and gathering. And there was a scarcity of animals because we were so good at hunting. And there was a scarcity of fruits and nuts to collect because we were so good at gathering. And we reproduced more, and there were more of us. And as a result, hunting and gathering became unsustainable. Our human intellect and creativity had expanded beyond the narrow restrictions of the hunting and gathering mode of production. And so we were forced to innovate and transcend to a higher stage and begin growing our own food for ourselves. And if we were just another species, we would have responded to the first ecological and economic crisis by dying off and getting things back into balance. But human beings have the ability to not do that. Any other species, if they bred too much and outstrip the food supply, they would just start dying and go back to where they were before, but not mankind. Human beings innovate to a higher plane, and they get beyond crises by moving ahead. And our life expectancy as a species has been constantly rising. Our population level has been constantly rising. And we've been developing more and more efficient fuel sources. Today in Haiti, people burn wood in order to heat their homes. They use charcoal. And that's what people used to heat their homes up into the 1800s. But from there, people started burning coal. And they started burning gasoline, petroleum. Now we've got nuclear power. We're constantly reinventing our relationship with nature to get to a higher level of efficiency, to expand our population, to expand our life expectancy, increase our life expectancy, and reach a higher plane. Human beings have this unique ability, and no other species is like human beings in doing so. And the whole story of human history is human beings thinking and innovating and expanding and growing, and then getting to a place where they're expanding and growing clashes with the mode of production. And so then they break forth, they burst forth that mode of production and reach a new mode of production in which they can think and expand and grow even more than the previous mode of production. We're constantly reinventing our relationship with nature. We're constantly then reinventing social relations in order to facilitate our new relationship with nature, our new technological situation. And we're constantly growing. We are the growing species. We are the innovating species. We are the tool-making species. We are the species that builds and constructs and expands. We are not like any other species. And I celebrate this about humanity. And it helps me to understand why we are in this bizarre situation, why it looks like we could possibly be on the brink of a war against Iran, why it is that our leaders have inculcated the population with pessimism, toxic pessimism, why it is that we are addicted to militarism and our leaders and our society is constantly fighting and finding new wars, why it is that big sections of the globe have eradicated poverty and lifted themselves up like never before, when just a couple generations ago they were impoverished and without industrialization. I can explain all of this with my innovationist perspective that all comes down to a celebration of God, the creator of all things, and the God-like ability of human beings to let that thinking stuff flow through us and to be thinking creatures and to create and innovate and expand. That I can explain. And that is the innovationist perspective. And what defines innovationism is our love for humanity, because all around us we have forces that would like us to hate humanity, that would like to tell us that humanity is no good. Human beings are a cancer on Mother Earth. Human beings constantly want to grow, and that's the ideology of the cancer cell. That's a line from the movie The Matrix. Right? That's the ideology of a cancer cell. Man is a virus. Right? This is what they're constantly pumping into our heads, and they're constantly telling it to children. All the climate awareness that they're giving kids in school is indoctrination in self-hatred, in pessimism. Children are not being inspired to go out and build anymore. They're being taught that they are a problem. They're being taught that there's no future. They're being taught that they use up too many resources, right? It's a travesty, a criminal travesty, what is being done to the next generation of children right now. And, you know, I will never be a parent, and I have no desire to be a parent. But I look at what's happening now and the way the world is, and I understand it. I don't appreciate it. I don't like it. But on some level, I understand it. And perhaps it makes me seem like a conservative, and perhaps it makes me seem like a very, very radical leftist. You can interpret this however you want. Right? You can interpret it however you want. But control The desire to control other people is a toxic desire. It is intoxicating for those who have it, and it is destructive for those on the receiving end of it, and it does not lead to good things, right? Wanting to control other people and subjecting other people to your control may be necessary at some points, but it's not a healthy desire. But regardless, those who rule over us are experts in control. And B.F. Skinner was a psychologist who developed what he called the science of behaviorism, learning how to control people. And B.F. Skinner came up with some very useful insights. One of the insights he discovered was that human beings don't want to be controlled. They really don't want to be controlled. And that if you control people in the conventional standard way with punishment, it can always fail because the punished victim, the person being punished, can always simply feel victimized and resent the punisher, and as a result, not change. Right? And that is true. And in fact, the harsher the punishment you impose on somebody, the less likely they are to change their behavior as a result. They will resent it. They will consider it to be aggression. They will not view it as legitimate authority. They will not listen to the arguments made by the punisher. They will resent it more, right? If somebody holds a gun to your head and makes you do something, you will probably do it to avoid getting shot. But you're not going to like that person. And the whole time you have the gun to your head, you're going to be thinking, how can I get this gun away from my head? You're not going to consider what the person is making you do to be a noble mission. You're going to resent it. You are going to resent having a gun to your head. And while that in the short term might compel you to do what the person who put the gun to your head said, in the long term, it is not going to change the way you think. It is not going to change the way you act. And it's going to make you more hostile to the person who put the gun to your head. That's how these things work. No one wants a gun to their head. And compelling people with force and punishment is not very effective. It can work to some degree or other, but it requires a level of brutality and it produces resentment. The result is resentment. However, if you manipulate people with reward, that is a much more effective way to manipulate people. And this has been talked about a lot, but no one ever says, I don't deserve this reward, right? If you give someone an award, say, you're really, really great. I just love this thing you did. I am going to pin a medal on you. No one says, what's he trying to trick me into doing? No, what's he trying to pull? No one says that. People want to get the reward. People don't examine the motivations of the rewarder. They examine the motivations of the punisher. And they almost immediately assume negative motivations on the part of the punisher. But when it comes to someone offering a reward, they almost immediately accept it and assume good intentions on the person giving it. It's much easier to control people with reward than it is with punishment. However, and again, this is all in the eye of the beholder. This is all in the eye of the person hearing this, right? You can interpret this however you want. This is not liberal. This is not conservative. I'm not like your dad. I'm not like your mom. I'm not like your pastor. I'm not like your teacher. I'm not like your best friend. I'm not like your child who misbehaves. I'm just telling you how it is. And you can project onto my words whoever's voice it rings for. And you can link me in your mind to many different people. We all have different voices in our lives. And there's a very real danger anytime I speak, but especially when I talk about these kinds of things, that you will hear a turn of phrase that I use, and it will remind you of someone that I've never met, someone who's got nothing to do with me, but it will ring a bell for that person in your mind. And as a result, you will put my words onto them. And that's how we all work. That's transference. That's just how these things work, right? And when I talk about topics like this, where all of us, no doubt, have associations, both very negative and very positive, and both very emotional and emotionally loaded associations, there's a risk that as I speak about these things, you will hear in my voice the voice of someone else. And even though my words will be what my words are, you will hear the words of that someone else, and you will, implant the situation that you had with that someone else into my words. And I don't want that. I don't want you to do that. I want you to just hear me. But that's not realistic. As I speak, they say words will ring bells for other words. And that is just something that anyone who speaks before an audience has to take into account. You can't just simply speak your words. You have to think about the other words that your words may be associated with. For example, on these live streams, we often talk about Stalin, and we often talk about how I do not agree with the general perception of Stalin and how he's portrayed in mainstream media. I've even written a book called Mystical Stalinism and the Struggle Against Revisionism in America. And I am very critical of the mainstream Western perspective of Stalin. The idea that Stalin was just an evil mass murdering dictator who never did anything good in his life and starved millions of people out of pure cruelty. I don't buy it. But when I talk about Stalin, I have to be very, very, very careful with the words I use. For example, right? With Stalin, they generally throw out big numbers. Stalin killed a gajillion million people. They give you a big number, right? I have to be very, very, very careful never to use phrases like how many million. Because if I used such phrases, it would ring a bell in the minds of the audience for those who question the Nazi Holocaust. Now, Stalin is responsible for the defeat of Hitler. It was Stalin's soldiers that liberated Auschwitz concentration camp and freed the Jews. It was Stalin who globally organized the Popular Front against fascism. It was because of Stalin that thousands of people went to Spain to fight against Hitler's ally Franco. It was the Battle of Stalingrad that turned the tide of the war and led to the defeat of Hitler. But yet, if I start talking to you tonight and start saying to you in defense of Stalin, if I were to start saying, well, these gulags that they went to, these camps, how many were these camps? If I start using phrases like that, people will immediately hear the way I am speaking, and they will associate it with those that question a well-documented event, the Nazi Holocaust. And even though I'm talking about Hitler's enemy, and even though I'm talking about completely different circumstances, no one alleges Stalin was gassing people to death because of their race. They talk about famines, they talk about gulags, no one. But if I were to use those words, the association in people's minds would lead them to think of me in a certain way that I don't want you to think of me. And that is something you have to remember. That is the danger whenever you speak about these kinds of topics, whether it's Stalin, whether it's mathematics or physics, right? Whenever you talk about anything, your words are never presented to a tabula rasa, right? A blank slate, right? There is no blank slate. Every listener that hears you is taking with them everything that they've ever heard before in their life. And you may not even remember it. You may not even remember it, but it's in your head. It may have left your conscious memory, but it's deep in your subconscious. When I speak to you, I am not just speaking to you, and you are not just hearing me. I am speaking to everyone you've ever spoken to, and my words are put into your mind alongside every other spoken word you've ever heard. And that's what makes the challenge of communication, right? If you're trying to teach people things that they do not know, it can be very difficult if you're competing with many other voices. And one thing that I strive to do on this channel, and I've been striving to do, this is live stream number 1013. I have I have tried to teach people concepts, facts, knowledge that they don't have. And yeah, I get fired up about it. Yeah, I get emotional. Yeah, I get persuasive. And, I am certainly not above giving a passionate speech. But at the same time, I have to teach. I have to teach you. And what frustrates me is that there are many, many people who get on the internet and they do a lot of preaching, but no teaching. And it infuriates me. There are so many channels now talking about communism, and they get on there and they don't teach their audience anything. They just appeal to their emotions. They just appeal to their pre-existing prejudices and resentments. And that's not helpful. And I listen to some of these people who have been set up to mimic this channel, to imitate this channel, to give a watered down, stupid version of what we do on this channel. And I try not to engage with their content because what infuriates me about it is they don't teach their audience anything. They just get on there and beat their chests like animals. They just get on there and talk about how cool they think they are and, how badass they think they are. And they don't teach anything. And especially if you're in the category of work that we're in, teaching is a necessity. If you're not teaching anybody anything, what are you doing? What are you doing if you're not teaching anyone anything? You've got to teach people because people don't know what we're talking about. If I was on here extolling the greatness of free market capitalism, I wouldn't have to teach you anything because that's what we believe in America. Capitalism is the only system that's ever worked. Capitalism, free market ideology is everywhere. So I don't have to teach you that. You learned it in school. You learned it from Milton Friedman. You learned it from ABC and NBC and Fox. You learned it in high school. You learned it in college. You learned it, so I don't have to teach you anything. I just appeal to those prejudices. Fine. I was on here appealing to you all about the evils of racism. For the most part, maybe there's a few of you that would disagree with that. But I think for the most part, we can all agree that racism is bad. I think our society in general has decided that we will have a mantra of racism is bad. So if I were to get on here and talk about the evils of racism, I would not need to educate you about anything. I would simply need to appeal to a feeling that is widely accepted right now that racism is bad, and that would be easy, right? But the thing is, I'm on here talking about anti-imperialism. I am on here night after night after night to tell you Russia is not our enemy. China is not our enemy. Iran is not our enemy. Cuba and Venezuela and Nicaragua and the Union of Sahel States, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, they are not our enemies. I'm on here to tell you that our enemies are on Wall Street. Our enemies are in Washington, D.C. And the people that we have been raised from the time we were little children to believe are our enemies are our friends. And the people we have been taught and are every day taught to worship by mainstream media, taught to worship by the society we live in, they are our enemies. And so if I were to get on here and make that case without any education, if I was to get on here and try to convince you of that with my haircut, I would be absolutely worthless. And they might be able to line up a bunch of bots to convince you that 1 million people were watching, which they wouldn't be. And they might be able to hire a troll farm to retweet me 1,000 times, but it wouldn't be doing a goddamn thing. But yet, if there was one person watching, just one of you was watching, who had never heard the other side of the story, never knew about the Alley of Angels, right? I've shown about the Alley of Angels on many streams, never knew that the reason Russia had to go into Donbass was to protect these children who've been murdered since 2014. If one person is watching right now who never heard that before and really bought into the idea that the war in Ukraine is it's Ukraine fighting for its freedom against evil Russia, and they'd never heard about the Alleys of Angels, and they never knew about the Euromaidan coup. If one person watching this sees the Alley of Angels for the first time, learns what the war in Ukraine is really about for the first time, debunks the Ukrainiac insane narrative that is pumped into our heads for the first time, if one person who's watching learns from what I am doing, I have accomplished far more than any demagogue who beats his chest, anyone who gets on there and talks about his haircut and how based he is. I have accomplished real things. I am trying to teach you. I may preach, yes, but when I preach, I am teaching. Because you don't know. You don't know. If you're an American, most of this audience is American, you don't know. I didn't know. I'm learning it every day. Right? If you're British, you don't know. Right? Maybe if you're in some other part of the world, you know it, and you probably know it very different than I know it. But we can't pretend that people know, and I can't just get on here and appeal to your prejudices. I can't get on here and just pander to your pre-existing assumptions. And if I did that, I would be in complete dereliction of duty, right? And, you know, I would be failing in my mission. And that's why it angers me when I see people that do that. People that, you know, get boosted online, that just get on here and pander. I'm not here to pander. I mean, there may be some emotion, there may be some, what do they call it, ethos or whatever, but at the end of the day, I am trying to teach you what I know and get you to understand the world. And I have been to the Islamic Republic of Iran. I spent a lot of time there in 2014. The first time I ever went was in September of 2014, and it was a life-changing trip. And I went back in May of 2015, and I was there for 2 months. And I went back in the fall, and Iran is a country that I feel a deep spiritual attachment to. I'm not a Muslim. I'm a Christian, right? Just so you know, I have never converted to Islam. But you will find on my finger, everywhere I go, I wear this. And what is this? This is an Islamic akak ring. It is what, when I was in Iran, the very religious men that I would see, they'd be walking around and they would have one of these on their finger. And I thought it looked very, very cool. And when I got back to the United States, I looked it up and I learned the story behind it. And I thought, I have to get one of these. And I reached out to my Shia Muslim friends. I said, is it okay if I wear one of these if I'm not a Shia Muslim? And they said, it is. It is. And I found out the story behind it. So this is a stone called a kek, A-Q-E-E-Q. And the reason that Shia Muslim men wear akak rings is because of a legend, a story, a hadith about the Prophet Muhammad. And the story goes that when the Prophet Muhammad was building his movement, Mecca, the holy city of Islam, at the time had a big temple. But the temple of Mecca was filled with pagan idols. And so the followers of the Prophet Muhammad seized the temple at Mecca and they smashed all of the idols. They smashed the idols. And so the Prophet Muhammad from that day forward wore a piece of one of the smashed idols on his finger as a trinket, as a reminder, a symbol of the victory of the one true God over falsity and idolatry. And I heard that story and I thought, I love that. And I want to wear one of these on my finger. And so that's why I wear an Islamic akak ring. I think it's a very, very neat thing to wear on one's finger. But there you go. But I'll get back to that in a second. Why is it that U.S. leaders are threatening a war against the Islamic Republic of Iran right now? Well, Caleb, that's because Iran is a terrorist country, and America loves freedom and hates terrorists, and Iran is terrorists, and they're trying to get a nuclear bomb to blow up Israel and blow up America. We're trying to stop them from getting a nuclear bomb. And so that's why we're threatening to go to war with them. Caleb, haven't you watched CNN? Haven't you watched MSNBC? Haven't you listened to Cornel West? Haven't you listened to Elizabeth Warren? Didn't you hear Donald Trump's speech the other night? Haven't you ever heard of Hillary Clinton speak on the subject? That's what it's about. Iran's trying to get an atomic bomb so they can nuke us. Well, I've got news for you. Iran has never, not once, moved toward taking an atomic bomb. But that's not true, Caleb. Well, it's true. And I can tell you how it's true, because Iran is a signatory of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And every country that signs the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and doesn't have the right to nuclear weapons under that treaty is a signatory that is a non-nuclear country. Any nuclear power facility they have must be monitored by the International Atomic Energy Agency, and any nuclear activity that they engage in must be monitored and reported to the International Atomic Energy Agency. And if they engage in any activities related to nuclear power and nuclear weapons that are not reported and observed by the IAEA, they are found in violation of that treaty. And Iran is a signatory of the International Atomic Energy Agency, of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and they've never once been found in violation of it. Not once. Iran has peaceful nuclear energy. But here's the crazy thing. In 2015, they gave up almost all of their peaceful nuclear energy. After the U.S. invaded Iraq, after George W. Bush declared Iran to be part of the axis of evil, Iran's president, Ahmadinejad, he said, we're not going to be kicked around. The USA was very isolated. Europe was mad at the United States, France and Germany. You remember freedom fries. And Ahmadinejad was elected, and oil prices were very high, and the state sector of the Iranian economy was quite, thriving. And because of that, the president of Iran said, we're going to start expanding our peaceful nuclear energy program. And the USA said, you don't have the right to do that. And they said, yes, we do. Yes, we do have the right to do it. Under the JCPOA, we have the right to peaceful nuclear energy as long as it's monitored. And Israel and America said, you can't do that. And they put sanctions on Iran. And Iran said, we're not going to be defied by your sanctions. We want to sell our oil. We don't want to use it for electricity. So we want to set up nuclear power plants so we can sell our oil and have the money and get power from nuclear power. And Iran expanded their nuclear energy program. And Israel and America pitched a big fit, and they threw a big fit, and they threw a big fit, and they threw a big fit. And they were furious about it, and they were really, really upset. And they put sanctions on Iran, and all kinds of things were going on. And then in 2006, Israel invaded Lebanon. And who was in Lebanon? Hezbollah. And Hezbollah, which is a Shia Muslim Islamic revolutionary organization aligned with Iran, Hezbollah kicked Israel's ass. They had snipers on rooftops, they had booby traps, they had people throwing bombs, and Israel went in and Israel went out. And Hezbollah epically destroyed the IDF. They drove the IDF out of Lebanon, and the whole Muslim world was cheering for the Shia Hezbollah army aligned with Iran. And as they rebuilt Lebanon in the aftermath of the Israeli invasion, they were building murals, not just with the face of Supreme Leader Khamenei, not just with the face of Ahmadinejad, not just the face of Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah. They were building murals with the face of Che Guevara in Latin America. They were building murals with the face of Fidel Castro and Hugo Chavez, because the Hezbollah movement and the Islamic Revolution of Iran attached themselves to Bolivarian socialism that was rising in Latin America. And the president of Iran, Ahmadinejad, began condemning capitalism and emphasizing the Islamic opposition to the system of capitalism. It was a very, very big and powerful moment for Iran. And the United States was very, very isolated around the world. And those high oil prices had enabled Russia to rebuild its economy with Gazprom and Rosneft. Putin had an energy economy that he had built and designed in his academic thesis. And Bolivarianism was rising in South America. And in that context, the U.S. economy dramatically crashed just in time for the election. And Barack Hussein Obama, do you hear that? Barack Hussein Obama. His father was a Muslim. He went to a Muslim school in Indonesia, was elected president of the United States, and Obama was going to reset America's relationship with the Muslim world. And Obama came into office, and Obama was not a Muslim, but Obama pulled a Napoleon, right? If you look at our book that we published on the Houthi movement, right? Who are the Houthis? What are they fighting for? One of our most widely read and distributed CPI books. There's a chapter, a section in this book, right? And it's called Napoleon's Arab Spring Backfires. And in this book, I talk about how Napoleon, right, the ever victorious general of the French military, when he seized Syria and when he seized Egypt from the British, he put up posters everywhere announcing that he was a Muslim and saying that he followed the Quran and that he followed the Prophet. So don't follow the British, follow me, because I'm a Muslim. And among Napoleon's inner circle, they laughed about it. They joked about it. They thought it was funny. They made fun of the Muslim people for believing it. But it was a propaganda tactic that Napoleon engaged in order to court support in Egypt and Syria in order to better colonize them. I maintain that Barack Obama was a 21st century Napoleon. That he was a guy, he was president of the United States, but he had dark skin. He had the middle name Hussein. He had a Muslim dad from Kenya. He had gone to a Muslim elementary school in Indonesia. And Obama got in there, and he wouldn't use the phrase Islamic terrorism. And he got in there, and he had Twitter wars with Netanyahu, which weren't real because the U.S. aid to Israel was just never cut off. He was a complete shill for the Israelis, but he had this public, made for social media, I don't like Israel. I'm Barack Obama. Look, I'm Barack Obama, and I don't like Israel. Netanyahu is a bit of a jerk. And it was all made up and faked out the Muslim world. And you have to imagine how the Arab Spring would have gone if we had had George W. Bush as president. Imagine that, the Arab Spring 2011, when all the Arab countries had explosions of rebellion. Imagine how differently that would have played out if we'd had George W. Bush as president. If that was the case, we would have about, 12 different Irans right now. We'd have 12 different revolutionary anti-imperialist countries. But George W. Bush was not president during the Arab Spring. Barack Hussein Obama was. And the Arab Spring was a controlled demolition. Something was going to happen. There was massive unemployment in Egypt. There were thousands and thousands and thousands of Egyptian young men who lived in graveyards. There was massive unemployment in Tunisia. There was a drought. People from the countryside were pouring into the cities, and there was economic problems, the financial crisis and the drought. And so Hillary Clinton, and Anne Marie Slaughter, and some very satanic evil people at the U.S. State Department, including Jared Andrew Cohen, not Jared Cohen, Jared Andrew Cohen, they decided to preempt, make the revolution happen on our terms, right? If there's an old building that's going to fall down, you don't want it to fall down, you do a controlled demolition. That's what the Arab Spring was. They did a controlled demolition. They had the revolution on their terms. Rather than let the revolution happen in a way that they couldn't control and predict, they brought in Barack Hussein Obama as the president, and they used social media, and they used Al Jazeera, and they used Turkey and Qatar and the Muslim Brotherhood to make the revolution happen on their terms. And a guy in Tunisia lit himself on fire because he got an unfair fine from the police, and social media made it explode, and one thing led to another, and Tunisia's government fell, Egypt's government fell. There was a civil, Libya started its civil war, Syria started its civil war. It was a controlled demolition. And that was very, very effective for the United States. And they were able to turn anger in the Middle East and anger in North Africa into a wave of chaos and bring down the most prosperous government on the African continent, Libya, and bring down the Syrian Arab Republic, which was an outpost of anti-imperialism that had aided the Palestinians, a socialist government, Ba'athist Arab socialism. And, they manipulated the Arab Spring for their own ends. And in addition to that, the policy of the Obama administration was that they would negotiate with Iran, right? They were going to make the Iran nuclear deal. And Iran, they had been devastated by sanctions. And Obama, because he had been to a Muslim school, because there's a huge amount of sympathy in Iran for the Black freedom movement. There are pictures and portraits of Malcolm X everywhere in Iran, right? Malcolm X is widely loved in Iran. Black Americans are widely loved in Iran. When the Iranian students seized the embassy in 1979, when the students took the U.S. embassy, there were Black people there and they let them go. Did you know that? They let them go because they said Black people are oppressed in America. Black Americans are not our enemy. They don't tell you that. I don't think they included that in the movie that they made about it, Argo. I think they forgot that part. Oh, darn. But yes, in Iran, there's huge sympathy for the Black freedom movement, huge admiration for Malcolm X, huge admiration for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., huge admiration for the Black Panthers and the Black freedom movement. I actually went to a conference in Iran dedicated to the Black freedom movement. And I met, there were people from the Nation of Islam there. There were people from, there was a Vernelia R. Randall from racism.org. She was there. And, there were people from the Black Lives Matter movement. And there were people from all kinds of different groups. And not only that, but there were people from Nigeria. There are all kinds of Nigerians who study in Iran. There are many Nigerian Muslims who converted to Shia Islam and they follow Sheikh Ibrahim Zakzaki. Zaria is a region of Nigeria that is Shia and aligned with Iran that has its own militias. And I mean, it's kind of amazing. You read about this, and Iran has deep roots in Nigeria. There were African liberation fighters. It was an amazing conference I went to in Iran. But anyway, back to the main point. So because there's huge sympathy for the Black freedom movement in Iran, because Iran is a Muslim country and Obama was doing the Napoleon thing, I'm not a Muslim, guys, and he wasn't a Muslim. He was faking them out, right? He's most likely a homosexual, but regardless, when Obama got in, there was a feeling that now we can negotiate a deal with America. So the people of Iran voted for Rouhani as their president, their new president. And their new president, Rouhani, came to the United Nations and he looked like Santa Claus, right? He had a white beard and he was always smiling like this. A chubby man with a long white beard. And, he was a cleric. He was always smiling. And he came to the United Nations and he said, I want everyone to join the wave, the world against violence and extremism. I want everyone to join the wave, right? And I was there at the UN when Rouhani made his tour, right? And he said, this is a new face for Iran. Iran, we are not radical anti-imperialists anymore. We want to negotiate with America. We're not a threat. And the P5+1 talks started happening. And it was a long thing. And I didn't realize it, but I was kind of a pawn in that whole thing. I thought I was just being an anti-imperialist activist, but there was a fight in Iran about the nuclear deal. There was a fight in America about the nuclear deal, and I was being pushed in different directions. I was in Iran in 2014 and 2015 while those negotiations were happening, and there was a lot going on that I look back on now, and I was like, I was in the middle of history. When I was in Iran, many times, I spoke at universities in Isfahan, I spoke at universities in Mashhad, and people asked me, should Iran sign the nuclear deal? And I always said, I don't know. I said, Iran has the right to sign it, but they may not want to. It's up to them. And the reason that I said, I don't know, is because on the one hand, what if it backfired on Iran? What if, this turned out to be a situation where Iran got stabbed in the back, which is what actually happened? So I didn't want to be advocating for Iran to do something that might potentially put them in danger. But on the other hand, as an American, I didn't want to go there and be advocating against my own country. And also, if the Iran nuclear deal could have potentially led to peace, I didn't want to be advocating against peace. So when I was at Iranian universities and they asked me, do you think America should sign, and America and Iran, should we sign this deal with America? I would always say, I don't know. That was always my position. And I am proud that I took that stance. And sometimes you have to do that. And there were people who were on these trips with me who really wanted me to tell the Iranians to sign the deal. And there were other people on the trips that really wanted me to tell the Iranians not to sign the deal. And I always said, I don't know, which was the correct answer. And that's because I had instincts. As much as I didn't know back then, I didn't know what I was in the middle of. I knew that I shouldn't be going there and advocating to sell this deal. On the other hand, I shouldn't be going there and telling them not to sign the deal. I said, I don't know, right? I had the common sense to say, I don't know. And there are a lot of people that were on those trips with me that were saying Iran ought to sign this deal, and I think they really regret it right now. And there were a lot of people that were going around saying Iran shouldn't have signed this deal, and maybe they feel good about themselves, maybe they don't. I don't know what they think, but I said I don't know, and that was the right answer. That was the right answer. I said I don't know. But regardless, 2015, Iran signed the nuclear deal, and they gave up almost every nuclear power plant they had. So they already had no nuclear bomb and no nuclear program. They gave up almost every nuclear power plant they had. And then there was an election in America, and Barack Obama said, I will join you as a citizen. And he left office. He left office having fixed nothing, right? Obama was supposed to solve America's race problems. Look how well that turned out. Right? Obama was supposed to improve America's relationship with the rest of the world. Look how well that turned out. Obama was supposed to close Guantanamo Bay. Look how well that turned out. I mean, Obama was an absolutely abysmal president. He was supposed to fix healthcare. Remember that? He was going to fix healthcare. He was going to clean up Wall Street. Remember that? Oh, he was going to get rid of all the Wall Street. Oh, man, Obama's presidency. You look at it, you want to talk about a failure of a president. I mean, other than what he set out to do, which is overthrow the most prosperous revolutionary government on the African continent of Gaddafi, destabilize Syria and kill hundreds of thousands of people in Syria and set the stage for a civil war. Other than that, Barack Obama's presidency was an epic failure. He really didn't do any of what he was supposed to do, but he left office, and then we elected Donald Trump in his first term. And Donald Trump is buddy-buddy with Benjamin Netanyahu, and Donald Trump, he's the art of the deal. So, and he hated the Iran nuclear deal. So Trump ripped up the Iran nuclear deal on ridiculous grounds. He couldn't find, I don't know if you remember this. Trump couldn't find any way in which Iran had actually violated the deal, because they didn't, right? They 100% complied with the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. So Trump said, Iran did not fulfill the spirit of the agreement. What? Iran did not fulfill the spirit of the agreement. What does that mean? All right. And then they said, well, Iran is still supporting Hezbollah. Iran is still supporting the Houthis in Yemen. And that's not in the spirit of the agreement. Well, that was specifically not included in the agreement. Many times, John Kerry was in Geneva meeting with Javid Zarif. And many times they wanted Iran to agree to stop supporting Hezbollah and stop supporting the Houthis. And many times Iran said, no, we're not including that. So that was not included. But I guess because Iran still has people around the region they support, Donald Trump said that's not in the spirit of the agreement. So the USA pulled out of the agreement and put all the new sanctions back on Iran. And that wasn't enough, right? It didn't cause a war. So then the USA murdered Qasem Soleimani. And it was a cowardly murder. The way Qasem Soleimani was killed is that in Iraq is a country that is 60% Sunni and about 40% Shia. And the Shia of Iraq have been besieged by Wahhabis, extremists that hate Shia, consider them Shia apostates. So Iran has had to give a lot of weapons and support to Shia Muslims. One of the most holy Shia sites, one of these sacred sites, was bombed and destroyed. And some of these Wahhabi groups, they say that if you kill 7 Shia Muslims, you go to heaven automatically, right? So there's like stories. You go into one of these Wahhabi mosques, and there'll be a couple guys, smoking cigarettes in the lobby, and they're not inside praying. And why are they praying? Why aren't they praying? He said, well, I already killed 7 Shia, so I'm sad. I can do whatever I want, and I can go to heaven because I killed 7 Shia, right? And these Wahhabi extremists, many of whom were former Baathists, former members of Saddam Hussein's army, right? After Saddam Hussein's government collapsed, Saddam Hussein was Sunni, and these guys are Sunnis, and Saddam Hussein's government collapsed, and they need someone to fund them. So they got money from Saudi Arabia, and they got money from the Osama bin Laden networks, the fanatical Wahhabi networks based in Saudi Arabia. And then they set up shop in Iraq and started killing Shia Muslims. So Shia Muslims had to turn to Iran to get support. And so Iran had a lot of Shia Muslims they were giving guns and weapons to, and all of that. And there's a lot of Shia Islamic militias that protect neighborhoods and stuff in Iraq. So because of that, right, Qasem Soleimani, the leader of the Al-Quds Brigade of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, the national hero of Iran, Qasem Soleimani went to Iraq to negotiate with the Iraqi government about the support that they gave to the militias in Iraq, the Shia militias, etc. And he went and he met. It was a peace negotiation in Iraq. And then on his way to the airport, they murdered him with a drone. It was one of the most cowardly, dishonorable acts of war ever, right? If you call somebody for a peace negotiation, and then as they're leaving, you blow up their car. I mean, it was just a cowardly, cowardly deed. And at that point, Iran pulled out of the nuclear deal, right? Because they gave up almost all their peaceful nuclear energy program. And then you murdered their top general, and the USA pulled out of it anyway. And so this idea that Iran is trying to get a nuclear bomb so they can kill us is so wrong. It is so false on so many levels. It is just not accurate. Iran is practicing their right to peaceful nuclear energy. They gave up their right to peaceful nuclear energy for the most part and signed an agreement with the United States. The USA didn't fulfill that agreement, so now they kind of have to. They kind of have to start making uranium again. They have to, start expanding their nuclear program. If not, it'll send a message to America that they can just do whatever they want, right? And this is the crazy thing. You get all these people talking about accountability. There's got to be accountability for America. Look, if a country gives up almost all its peaceful nuclear energy program for you, and in exchange, you don't do what you said you're going to do, you kick them in the teeth and you murder their top general, what do you think? What are they supposed to do? Right? Iran has to start expanding. It has to start enriching uranium. It has to start building nuclear power plants. What do you expect them to do? Seriously, I mean, any other country in these circumstances, you sit down at the table, you sign away all your peaceful nuclear energy program in exchange for that country not attacking you. And then that country attacks you and attacks you in a really awful, vicious way, killing your national hero, your national celebrity. What are you supposed to do at that point? Tell me, what do you think Iran is supposed to do? Is Iran just supposed to say, oh, well, thank you very much. Thank you. No, Iran has to start enriching uranium now. That's the way these things work. And that's how they lie. Why does North Korea have an atomic bomb? North Korea, they're not Muslims in North Korea. They are Marxist, Leninist, Juche atheists, right? They don't believe that nuclear weapons violate the peaceful nuclear energy program. Why does North Korea have nuclear weapons? Why do they have them? Well, first of all, South Korea had a nuclear program throughout the 1970s and even up into the 80s. They don't tell you that. But why does North Korea have nuclear weapons? Because after the fall of the Soviet Union, the USA killed millions of North Koreans. They induced a food crisis in the country. The same thing they're doing to Cuba right now, where they cut off a country's oil supply. That's what they did to North Korea. North Korea, they've worked really, really hard. They've got, fields up in the mountains, and they've worked really, really hard to develop an agricultural system, even though they're the mountainous part of North Korea that doesn't have arable land, But regardless, they need oil, petroleum for their tractors. After the fall of the Soviet Union, they couldn't get oil from the Soviet Union anymore. The USA enforced the petrodollar. And as a result of the petrodollar, North Korea couldn't get oil for their tractors. And there was a food crisis in the country, and millions of people died, right? I mean, I don't know the numbers, right? I just don't know them, right? And we don't know them either. I've heard big numbers like 4 million or something. I've heard some people say it was in the hundreds of thousands. There was a food crisis in North Korea. People starved to death in North Korea. And North Koreans were just fleeing to China to get food because of this food crisis. And, it's so awful. They accused North Korea of counterfeiting. You ever hear this? It was a big scare in U.S. media in the 90s. North Korea is counterfeiting money. What was that about? It was about the fact they needed dollars to buy petroleum, the petrodollar. They couldn't buy petroleum, and they alleged that North Korea was making super bills. And you look into that, the super bills were actually printed by the American government, but they were like fake money the American government printed to circulate. You look at the details of that story, it's not even clear that North Korea was even doing that. But if they had been, it would make sense. If you need oil so people in your country can eat, and your government's job is to make sure the people in the country eat, and you're having a food crisis, you might print some fake money, but they didn't do it, apparently. If you look at the details, read about the super bills story. It looks like the U.S. government printed fake money and gave it to people they thought were counterfeiting to track them. The money, the super bills that North Korea supposedly made were actually made by the American government. So the American government already makes real bills. So why in the world would the American government make super bills? The U.S. government counterfeited its own money and gave it to North Korea. You look at the details of that story. It's completely insane. Anyway, back to the main point, right? So North Korea had a food crisis and people were starving to death. And the North Koreans knew what was happening next. They knew what the plan was. The idea was induce a food crisis, get people starving and desperate, and then invade. And so North Korea came forward and they said, all right, if you don't give us some oil, if you don't give us some heating gas so that our people aren't freezing cold in the winter, we're getting the atomic bomb. And that's what they did. In 1994, they said, we are getting the atomic bomb. And Bill Clinton sent Madeleine Albright to meet with Kim Jong-il. And she went to North Korea. And Madeleine Albright met with Kim Jong-il. And she said, he was an intelligent person. No shit, Sherlock. I was impressed. Kim Jong-il was a very smart man. Well, he leads a country of tens of millions of people. You expecting him to be an idiot? And she was just shocked. Kim Jong-il was brilliant. I met with him. He was just a really smart, intelligent guy. Well, no kidding. Geez, wow. That was classic. And they made a deal with North Korea. If you don't get nuclear weapons, in exchange for not getting nuclear weapons, we'll give you all this oil, we'll give you all this heating gas, and in fact, we'll even build you a peaceful nuclear energy power plant. And North Korea said, all right. And the USA gave them a bunch of oil, and it gave them a bunch of food, and it started building a peaceful nuclear energy power plant for them. It started to work out. And then the US Congress cut off the funds. The Republicans cut off the money in Congress. Bill Clinton's deal was overridden by Congress. And North Korea waited. And Bill Clinton left office and North Korea waited. And George W. Bush took office and North Korea waited. And 9/11 happened. And North Korea sent sympathy to America after 9/11. And they condemned terrorism. And then George W. Bush gave his axis of evil speech. And he said, there's an axis of evil in the world. There are three countries that have nothing to do with 9/11, that are not even really connected to each other that much. But there are these three countries, and they're the axis of evil. And we got to overthrow all three of them. One of those countries is Iran, that hates Iraq. We got to overthrow them. Another country we got to overthrow is Iraq. And the other country we got to overthrow is North Korea. And North Korea is like, wait a second. We agreed not to get nuclear weapons in exchange for you giving us all this food. And we got some of it. And then you stopped giving us the food. And we've been waiting and waiting and waiting. We're not getting the food. We're not getting the oil. You're not helping us build our peaceful nuclear energy power plant you promised to give us. And now you just made a list of countries, the axis of evil, Iraq, Iran, and us, that you're going to invade. And then you just invaded one of them with lies about weapons of mass destruction. And you blew up Iraq, and hundreds of thousands of people are dead, and a refugee crisis and all of that. And now you're putting sanctions on Iran. We're getting nuclear weapons. And in 2004, North Korea withdrew from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and they tested an atomic bomb. Again, what do you think they were supposed to do? Were they supposed to go, oh, you promised all of this to not get nukes, and you didn't do it, and we waited for 4 or 5 years for you to not do it, and you didn't do it, and then you announced you're going to invade us, and so we're just going to be fine with that? Was that what they were supposed to do? Like, and again, like, no one ever stops to think about this from the other perspective. I listened to Marco Rubio speak. He says Iran is developing long-range missiles, and these long-range missiles couldn't hit America, but they could hit Europe. And so they're threatening Europe. Iran is threatening Europe, and maybe eventually Iran could get long-range missiles that could reach America, so they're threatening America. Folks, let me show you. This is a map of all the military bases around Iran. All right? I just want to show you this to you, because so we're told that Iran developing long-range missiles is a threat, right? Where is this map? We're told it's a threat, right? This is Iran. This is Iran, and all those little circles with American flags in them, those are U.S. military bases. So you tell me, how is Iran threatening us? So the idea is Iran, right now they don't have long-range missiles that could hit us. But in the future, they might get long-range missiles that could potentially hit us. Meanwhile, we have military bases all around them that could hit them tomorrow. But they're the ones threatening us. I mean, how stupid do they think we are, right? I mean, look at this. A country on the other side of the world is surrounded by U.S. military bases. Look at all those U.S. military bases. But they're the aggressor. That's Iran is the aggressor. They're threatening us. Give me a break. 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 And you look at this map, and it's just like, but yeah, Marco Rubio says Iran has long-range missiles that can hit Europe, and they might develop potentially in the future missiles that could hit us. So they're the threat. They don't have nuclear weapons. They gave up almost all their peaceful nuclear energy program, but they're the threat. They're the aggressor. We should be scared of Iran. Trump, in his speech last night, he said Iran has never said the magic words, the secret words, we will never get a nuclear weapon. Iran has said that for 47 years. For 47 years, their religious principle has been, we will never get nuclear weapons because it goes against Islam. The Islamic Republic of Iran has condemned nuclear weapons from the beginning. And, they just never said it. Yeah, they did. Yeah, they did. What we're being told about Iran is lies. It's absolute lies. And, now a couple other things. Is the human rights situation in Iran perfect? No. Is it good? No. Right? Iran's not where we're at as a country. Iran is a country that had a revolution, and, on their border with Afghanistan, they have a huge problem with heroin. 1 in every 100 Iranians is addicted to heroin because Afghanistan is right on the border. There's a park in the capital city of Tehran they call the Needle Park because it's just where all the heroin is. They have a big problem with heroin. So Iran, they basically have a policy. You get caught smuggling drugs into this country, we kill you. Iran, marijuana, they don't care about, right? Marijuana is basically legal in Iran. But if you get caught with heroin, we hang you, right? Also, there are Sunni separatist groups, Al-Qaeda-linked groups that are trying to break sections of Iran away because they don't agree with the Shia government. Well, Iran says you work with those terrorist groups that have done bombings and assassinations of officials. You work with them, we will kill you. Why do they say that? Well, because these terrorist groups and these drug dealers tend to have a policy of pointing guns at people and saying, work with us or we kill you. So the only way the government can effectively fight them is they have to be able to point guns back and say, if you work with them, we will kill you. It's kind of a kill or be killed military situation. It's not pretty at all. They use the death penalty very liberally in Iran. I don't think the death penalty is good. I would like the death penalty to be abolished in every country in the world. And the way we do it in America doesn't make any sense, right, from a legal perspective. But at the same time, if I was the government of Iran, I would use the death penalty the same way they do. I would definitely be, saying, okay, we're at war with the drug cartels. We're at war with Al-Qaeda, with the Wahhabi, Sunni separatist terrorists. And yeah, we need to be able to, scare the hell out of people out of working with them. We need to have the same level of threat. So I understand why Iran has the death penalty. It sucks. It's not good. I don't think it's a good thing, but they do. And they do execute people a lot in Iran. Not a good thing. Not a good thing. When I was in Iran, I'll tell you this. I was in Iran, right? And they took me to the grave of the nuclear scientists. These guys were scientists who were building a power plant in Iran, a peaceful nuclear power plant. One of the guys was walking to class to teach his students, and an MEK terrorist came out and shot him on the street as he was going to teach his class. This guy was a father. He had kids. He was just a professor, wasn't a military guy, wasn't involved in it. He was just a professor of physics who was working on building their nuclear power plant. And he also taught classes at the university. And one day he was walking to class, and a terrorist assisted by Israel, a member of the Mujahideen Khalq, killed him, murdered him on the way to class. Well, when I was there, and they showed me the site where he'd been killed, and my Iranian guide said, yep. And you know what happened? You know what they did? A couple weeks later, they got a guy that was involved in killing him. It may not have been, I don't think it was necessarily the guy who pulled the trigger. I think it was a guy who was part of the network that had smuggled the guy into the country to kill him, or maybe it had been the guy who pulled the trigger. I don't know. They said, well, they got the guy who did it, and they killed him at this site. Right? They brought thousands of people to this site where this peaceful nuclear energy scientist had been gunned down on his way to class, and they brought a giant crane, and they brought a crane and they hung the guy on the crane, right? And the crane went up and the guy hung. That's pretty brutal. That's pretty intense. And thousands of people there watched this assassin terrorist from the Mujahideen Khalq, who had killed a peaceful nuclear energy scientist guy, get the death penalty. That's because Iran is in a state of war. And somebody who was working on nothing but trying to build a peaceful nuclear energy site got murdered in the middle of the street by Israel and by the Mujahideen Khalq terrorist organization. And Iran is at war with these murderous terrorists and with the murderous Israelis. And so that's how they responded. That's what they did. They hung the guy in the middle of the street. And thousands of people watched and probably applauded as that guy got hung, and that's, is that a situation that a country should be in? No. Is that something do you think the Iranians are happy about this? Yeah, we want to have a country where our scientists get killed on the street and then we have to hang the guy who did it on a crane in the middle of the street. Do you think they want that? Do you think that's what they're thinking about? That's what we want to be. We want to be a country that does that. Of course not. These are the situations that countries are in. And again, and people who don't know the context and people who don't understand this, they say, well, Caleb, Iran is an evil country. They hang people on cranes. Yeah, well, Israel's an evil country that murders scientists on the way to teaching their physics class. And America is an evil country for turning Afghanistan into a giant poppy field and, overthrowing the Taliban. And for 20 years, America occupied Afghanistan. And at the same time America was occupying Afghanistan, it became the heroin capital of the world. Right? About half the heroin in the world at this point is made in Afghanistan, right on Iran's border, flooded their country with heroin. Thousands and thousands of Iranians are dead because the U.S. government controlled Afghanistan for 20 years and let the drug trade flourish, right? It turns out Walmart was sitting down with the drug dealers and Walmart was sitting down with Al-Qaeda. Did you hear about this? Right? Walmart. This was revealed towards the end of the Obama administration. Walmart was contracted by the U.S. military to build buildings at U.S. military bases. Did you know this? Right? They were contracted. Just military bases all over Afghanistan. Walmart, big company. So Walmart executives, Walmart CEOs were flying into Afghanistan and meeting with the drug cartels and saying, don't blow up our building. You can blow up other American military buildings. We don't care about that. But don't blow up the one we built. That'll be bad for our insurance. Here's a big suitcase full of money to not blow up our building. This happened, and it wasn't just Walmart. You can read about it. It was a big scandal. The American government And American major corporations and military contractors were handing cash to Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, handing cash to the Taliban, handing cash to the drug cartels. And those drug cartels were going over the border into Iran and getting people addicted to heroin and murdering children and blowing up buildings. But we're told Iran is bad because they hang people on cranes for doing that. Well, I don't think Iran wants to hang people on cranes, but I think if that's the situation that your country is in, and if people have been trying to invade and destroy you for 47 years, you've been fighting for your life for 47 years, I think the situation is not one that we as Americans, we can sit up there in our ivory tower and say, yes, the death penalty is wrong. Okay, yeah, you can say that. That's fine. And I agree with you. I don't think we should have the death penalty. But if we were in their shoes, I think we would probably be doing something similar to the same thing. And you can't judge, right? Tabula rasa, a blank slate, right? So many people, they think that revolutions and politics, they think it's Sim City. You ever play Sim City? That was one of my favorite computer games when I was a kid. In Sim City, they give you a blank thing and you build a road here and I'm going to have a commercial district here and a residential district here and I'll just design it however I want. Having a revolution is not Sim City. It's not, right? And that's why my debate with Destiny Stephen Bennell, I think I did a pretty good job. But for the first bit, he kept trying to get me to play Sim City. And I kept explaining to him that, no, communism, socialism is not Sim City. And, he kept trying to get me to design an intricate blueprint for what it's going to look like. And I said, I can't do that because what is built is based on the conditions and the struggles that exist beforehand. You don't get to play Sim City. That's not how it works, right? And that, you think the Bolsheviks did that? They just handed them Russia and said, do whatever you want? No, right? Do you think that do you think Fidel did that? He took power and they just handed him Cuba and it was just a blank thing and then he started playing Sim City? That's not how it works, right? But that's how people that want to ridicule communism, ridicule Iran, ridicule these countries that have a revolution. Oh, look what they did. That's not heaven on earth. That's not utopia. Well, no shit, Sherlock. You can't. It's based on what was there before, right? History moves forward. There are conflicts. There are conditions. There are different forces that clash with each other. There are divisions and reunifications and reconciliations. It's not that simple. You can't just build things out of thin air. And if you thought that Iran was just going to build something out of thin air, they've done amazing things. They have wiped out illiteracy in their country. They have universal employment in Iran. They have electrified that entire country. They had a construction jihad. At the same time, as soon as they had their revolution, the USA backed Iraq and Saddam Hussein to invade them. They were fighting off the invaders. And Khomeini called for a construction jihad. And they built hospitals all over the country. They built these beautiful modern highways. You wouldn't believe the highways they have in Iran. They electrified the entire country. They brought phone communication to the entire country. The Islamic Revolution of Iran has done utterly amazing things. But they did them in a context. They did them in the context of being an underdeveloped country. They did them in the context of being invaded by Iraq. They did it in the context of U.S. sanctions and threats and Israeli attacks on them. They did them in a context, right? And given the context, Iran has done a pretty amazing job. And that's just the facts. Are there things you can criticize about Iran? Sure, right? There are plenty of things you can criticize about Iran, right? In Iran, women's testimony in court doesn't count as much as a man's does. That's not fair, right? In Iran, there are laws like if you poke somebody's eye out, they can amputate your eye. I don't believe in that kind of thing, but that's their traditional Islamic system, things like that, right? There's things you can criticize in Iran, right? Okay, let me just throw this out there. Christians are not persecuted in Iran. They're not. I've been to Iran. I went to church on Sunday morning. Christians are not persecuted in Iran. Christian Zionists are persecuted in Iran. Let me say that once again. Christians are not persecuted in Iran. Christian Zionists are persecuted in Iran. There's all these websites about, oh my God, this Baptist minister, this Iranian woman who's a dual citizen with America, she went to Iran and she was just handing out a Bible and they arrested her. No, she converted to a congregation that is pro-Israel. She converted to a church, a Baptist church or an evangelical church that has an Israeli flag in it. And then she went back to Iran and tried to recruit people to join this church that has an Israeli flag on it. Nope, you can't be a Zionist in Iran. You can't be a Zionist in Iran. That is one thing you cannot do. You can be Jewish. I saw a synagogue. I saw a kosher butcher shop in Isfahan, right? There are Jews in Iran, but you can't be a Zionist. There are Jewish members of parliament even in Iran, but you can't be a Zionist. That is one thing. And, should people in theory be allowed to be Zionists? I guess yes. In an ideal world, yes. But when you're Iran and when you've been at war with Israel, for 47 years, since your revolution, when Israel's been trying to overthrow you all that time and is killing your scientists and bombing you and trying to get America to invade you, again, not the ideal circumstances, but yes, there are Christians in Iran, there are Jews in Iran. But if you are a Zionist in Iran, they will throw you in jail for being a Zionist. They will. If you are going around advocating Zionism, if you are part of a religion that promotes Israel and promotes Zionism, they will throw you in jail. And that includes the Baha'is, right? Where is the headquarters of the World Baha'i Movement? Baha'i is a religion that I believe started in Iran, but where is their international headquarters? It's on a mountain in Israel. Do you think they're going to be kind to that? You think they're going to respect it, right? You think they're going to be thrilled about that, right? That there's a religion called Baha'ism that the dictator of Iran, the Shah, many of his inner circle had converted to Baha'ism, right? It's an obscure religious movement, and many of the Shah's trusted people, many of the wealthiest people in Iran had converted to Baha'ism, and I believe it was started in Iran. But their sacred mountain is in Israel, and the religion centers around this mountain in Israel, and Baha'is from all over the world go to Israel. So you think the Iranian government's going to be cool with Baha'is? It's going to be like, oh yeah, just do Baha'ism. No. And do Baha'is get arrested? Yep. Do Baha'is go to, yeah, Baha'is are pretty heavily, they're regulated and monitored, and they're pretty strict in how they operate, and their ability to proselytize their faith and do outreach is restricted because they are viewed as Zionists. Their religion is viewed as part of Israel, right? And these issues, again, in an ideal world, if Iran was just a blank slate and they were building an ideal world, they probably wouldn't have that policy. But again, you have to understand it from their perspective. Iran is not our enemy. Iran is not our enemy. And the globalist bankers and the imperialists want to destroy Iran because Iran is part of the New World. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Eurasian Economic Union of Russia. Iran is part of the world that is broken out of globalism, broken out of imperialism. That's what Iran is. And Iran is not our enemy. Iran has the same enemy that we have. Our enemy is the big banks and corporations that are looting this country and impoverishing us. Our enemy is the people who set up the prison industrial complex. Our enemy is, I just can't get over this, right? In Trump's speech, he said, this is the best economy ever. It's the best economy it's ever been. Well, and then in his speech, he mentions he has a woman there as a mom who homeschools kids. The dad works in a heavy machinery plant. The dad works 10 to 15 hours overtime every week, in addition to 40 hours. The dad's working, he's working 55-hour weeks, 10 to 15 hours overtime. And the mom waits tables and bartends at night just so they can pay their bills for the kids. And Trump is saying, look how amazing it is. She doesn't have to pay taxes on her tips anymore. And it's like, this is the best economy ever. And just to raise a family, it's not enough for the dad to work 40 hours a week. He's got to work 55 hours a week. And then on top of that, mom has to bartend all night and wait tables all night. And we're supposed to be happy that she saved $5,000 because she doesn't have to pay taxes on tips anymore. This is not a good economy. When people have to work that much just to raise their kids, whatever happened to dad working and mom, especially if it's a homeschooling mom, right? She can't send those kids to school, from 8 in the morning to 2 and all that. Mom has to raise those kids all the time. She shouldn't have to work another job. That's ridiculous. This is the best economy we've ever heard. This is the best economy ever. You're like, what in the world is this? We can't, we're not getting a decent wage. We're not, our country's falling apart. right? Bridges collapse and our water's not properly purified and healthcare costs are insane. We have been royally screwed by the same big bankers and international monopolies that are wanting us to go to war with Iran, right? That's the reality, right? The same big international bankers who set up Israel as an outpost of their system, the Balfour Declaration, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the DuPonts, the Vanderbilts, the Mellons, the Morgans, the same globalist elites that are trying to convince us that they've got a great plan for us where we'll live in a pod and we'll eat bugs and we'll own nothing and we'll be happy about it. They want us to hate Iran and they want us to be on board with a new war against Iran. Well, I'm telling you, Iran is not my enemy. Iran is not my enemy. When I was in Iran, I got to see the supreme leader speak, and that was a life-changing experience that I'm not going to talk about tonight, because if I talk about it, I'm going to start crying. I'll get too emotional. I just don't want to get emotional and talk about it tonight. I've met multiple Iranian presidents, including one president, Ibrahim Raisi, who died under very questionable circumstances, but I actually got to sit down and have a long interview with him, right? And, you know, Israel hates me because of that, right? And if you don't believe that Israel hates me, there's a quite popular newspaper in Israel called Haaretz. And after I went to that conference in Iran, Haaretz ran a hit piece on me, right? You know, they ran a hit piece against me for going to that conference, written by a socialist named Alex Reed Ross, that Gray Zone revealed was, in fact, an FBI agent. Basically, he was working for the Department of Homeland Security. He was working for like a nonprofit they set up called the Network Contagion Institute. And Alex Reed Ross was a socialist, a social fascist, right? Just like the people who killed Rosa Luxemburg because she wouldn't support World War I. They hired a socialist, a DSA guy, to destroy my reputation. And he wrote articles in Haaretz, and he dispersed a bot army to go after me. And, you know, BreadTube, there are videos on YouTube that have hundreds of thousands of views that claim I'm actually a white nationalist. I'm actually a white supremacist. You know, I'm married to an immigrant. Did you know that? My wife is from Guatemala, right? You know, that claim, you know, I mean, I've literally video recorded police beating up young black women and gotten them acquitted in court. But none of that matters because, you know, Alex Reed Ross and BreadTube, brought to you by Steve Hassan, the Cult Awareness Network, they have destroyed my reputation. They have gone at great lengths to destroy my reputation. But I'm still here because, you know, I'm a strong person and I can take it. And you're still here because you're not an idiot and you can see through the bullshit. And that's why you're still watching me. And they have gone after me on every angle you would believe. They've even created fake me's, right? They've created fake versions of me designed to prevent you from watching me, right? They've got cheap knockoff versions of me out there to try and keep you from watching me. But, you know, I mean, it's unbelievable how they've viciously gone after me, how they've viciously gone after CPI. When we were in Minneapolis, right, there were hundreds of protesters, or not hundreds, 15 protesters. I'm sorry, not hundreds. I don't know. It's been a long night. This is what happened. We went to Minneapolis last February, about 1 year ago. We went to Minneapolis just to have a little CPI workshop. Penny, our beloved member, you know, put on this workshop. And this is what happened last year. This is how much the Israelis are out to get me.
We went out to Minneapolis to do just kind of a routine, small workshop that we do in a number of cities. We've done them before, where we get together, have some classes, get to know different members, different friends. Anyhow, we get out there and we see all these crazy signs posted up all over the neighborhood.
Let's not alert the membership as of yet, right? Because they want a reaction. If they see they're getting a reaction, that'll embolden them, right? We'll just be extra careful with security at the door. But honestly, I don't think we should not do the event. No, I think we should do it. I guess we'll just proceed with our meeting as usual. Okay, so the first thing is that the break time is the most important, right? The break time when we're actually talking to people is the most important time, right? Actually, when I'm speaking and all that, it's not that important. What's important is when we're talking with the people.
On Saturday morning, our main concern was the lack of heat. The Airbnb had not turned the heat on, and it was record low temperatures. It was a very, very cold night, so we're inside the house, and we're figuring we can't really start the workshop until the heat comes on. So then we see them outside.
Burger King! Burger King! Burger King! Burger King! Burger King!
It is 8:30 in the morning.
And it's like 20 below zero. You're gonna wake up the whole neighborhood.
Yeah.
Everyone's in the neighborhood's gonna hate them.
The house across the street looks abandoned or dilapidated. I don't think they're worried about fascism. They're worried about putting food on the table.
We're worried about getting the heat turned on.
Yes,
It's a little cold here. The heat hasn't been turned on in our Airbnb.
And these guys start preemptively gloating that nobody is showing up.
So we expected you like turning the attendees away. This is amazing. It seems like no one is coming. Wow.
Not knowing that we literally don't have heat and we're not gonna start the thing without heat. It was actually like a solid hour after they left before we got the heat. And then we had people start coming. Well, actually, I take that back. There was one gentleman they did get to try to intimidate out of attending, a disabled gentleman, which, you know, that's cool.
They shouted at him, "Don't go in there, they'll rape you."
He attended, though. He was not scared of them.
Hello, Gabby.
I've seen you. I've seen you.
Can we see what they gave you?
Hello.
Can we see what they gave you?
Warning, this is a cult. Press TV. Oh, wow. It's Dugan.
Press TV.
Oh, man. Linda LaRouche. And your name's on here, too.
Really?
Yeah.
What? Famous.
Right? You're a failed political candidate and dedicated follower of Caleb Maupin's.
You know, we're inside and like laughing about it. The whole thing just looked completely insane. At 8:30 in the morning, in record cold temperatures, you have 15 kids out there wearing COVID masks with signs about spanking and fascism and cults. I mean, the whole thing just had to look completely insane.
What are they saying?
Maupin runs the CPI. He's a weird little guy.
One of the chants that they had, which I absolutely loved, was Caleb owns CPI. He's a weird little guy.
Caleb runs the CPI. He's a weird little guy.
They're calling you weird, dancing around with signs that no one understands.
Now, I thought that was very funny.
And by the way, don't you find some of their stuff to just be plain weird?
At one point, Peter Coffin walked out among the protesters. I immediately thought of the scene in The Wizard of Oz where Dorothy wakes up and she's walking among the munchkins.
Come out, wherever you are.
Because they were all like really short in comparison to him. And it made me think that the guy on the bullhorn or one of the people that had thought of that chant, they must have been called a weird little guy at some point in their life.
You're so out of touch. You think CPUSA would be a viable force to put together a picket like this? It's amazing.
They were on the bullhorn talking about communist inside baseball.
Colt, I mean, you started in the RCP, so it's used to Colt.
Gospels or a joke, even to trots.
No, we're trying to show you we care enough to tell you guys what's going on here. We want you guys to get out of the cult. We're trying to show you we care enough. No, we're trying to show you we care enough to tell you guys what's going on here. We want you guys to get out of the cult.
We are going to have some fun with them, but we don't want to be too mean to them because there's a lot of people in this organization around the country, and I'm not going to violate anyone's private business, but more than a handful of people that have joined CPI, they've told me why they joined CPI. And they said, Caleb, you know, I was in these communist circles, I was in my 20s, and I was using drugs. I rock bottomed. You know, I screwed up, I did something wrong, and, you know, I had to go into recovery. And I realized that if I was going to get over my addiction, I couldn't keep thinking in the pessimistic, dark, hopeless way that seems to accompany communist politics in America. I had to be optimistic. And I suddenly started hearing you, and you were the only communist I could stand to listen to anymore. You were the only one that was putting out a hopeful, optimistic message that wasn't tearing people down, that wasn't preaching resentment. I believe there were people out there that are in that same category. Do you know what I honestly believe deep in my soul? I believe that there were people out there today that will eventually join CPI.
Let me just put it this way. You can never say that the Center for Political Innovation or myself or Peter, you can never say that we're irrelevant. The fact that we had a small meetup was so important to some people that they woke up on Saturday morning, went out in freezing cold temperatures, and made a huge ruckus to tell everyone just how upset they were about the fact that we exist and we continue to do our work.
We were ready to defend ourselves,
But they weren't a threat to us at all. They were kind of embarrassing, and they were kind of clowns. And I'm embarrassed for whatever organization let this happen, was involved in making it happen. And I'm also embarrassed for the people that did this protest, because you were out there making fools out of yourselves while we were inside talking about the serious issues and how to change the future of our country, how to fight against imperialism, globalism, how to fight for working families. So yeah, certainly an interesting trip to Minneapolis. I'm glad we were there, and yeah, we're gonna do a lot more workshops, let me put it that way.
Yeah, good times. But anyway, folks, so I'm going to finish this book tonight. I've only got I've got one more chapter in the conclusion, so I'm going to finish this book tonight. We're just going to finish the book. I'm going to read it, so that way I'll have the full audiobook done. I do want to answer questions. If you have a question for me to answer in the second half of the show, please go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin and send me a question. You can also do a Rumble rant. There's one Rumble rant that's already come in. You can cash at me at Caleb Maupin 22, but send me questions for the second half of the show. I am going to, read the rest of this book. Before I do that, I'm going to put some music on, and then we're going to read the rest of this book, and then we'll do the roll call, and I'll answer questions, and then we're done for the night. So I am going to put the German Melody by Cornelius Cardew on while I go to the bathroom, and then I'll come back, and then I will finish this book tonight, and then I'll answer your questions. So send questions for the second half of the show. Go to buymeacoffee.com, send me questions to answer. I need y'all to do that. Support the channel, support the work that we're doing. I just bought a huge sign for our rally that we're having. It was $145, this sign that I bought. Huge sign, which you're going to love. Can't show it to you tonight, but we're hitting the streets across the country. We're doing great stuff. We do need your support. So buy me a coffee, send me a question to answer in the second half of the show. I'm putting the music on. I'm going to the bathroom, and then we're going to finish this book tonight, and then I'll answer people's questions. So here we go.
When he was out in front, his fist was raised to strike them. Brigades were growing thick and fast to take the battle forward. The flag was red and the fight was on. For our sturdy comrade Tailman, raise your fist. Sound the alarm. The bony court has sentenced him to perish. But when the people of the world rise up to liberation, we'll snatch the axe that falls on him. For our sturdy comrade Tailman, raise your fist. Dimitrov was injustice, but the traitors thought they had him. But news was spread at lightning speed, and world opinion freed him. The world awakes, indignation flames, for our sturdy comrade Tailman, raise your fist.
Spanish heaven spread their brilliant starlight high above our trenches in the plain. From the distance, morning comes to greet us, calling us to battle once again. Far off in the home, get ready, we
All right, everybody. Welcome back. Yeah, so the rest of the first half of the show is going to be me reading from this this book. I'm going to finish this book. I did want to show this is a video. I mean, a lot of people say that Iran may actually sink the USS Gerald Ford. I mean, if that actually happens, you know, John Kiriakou is warning that means World War III. But I mean, it sounds like the Supreme Leader just kind of hinted that that may happen. This is a statement the Supreme Leader just made.
شکوه و جلال کشتی معروف تایتانیک مانع از غرق شدن اون نشد، آمریکا هم شکوه و جلالش مانع از غرق شدنش نیست و آمریکا غرق خواهد شد.
Yep. So there we go. Yeah, but anyhow, I'm going to read you the final chapter and the conclusion of this book. But please send questions for the second half of the show. Best way to do it is to go to Buy Me a Coffee. If you can send me a Buy Me a Coffee question for the second half of the show, that would be awesome. I see John has already done it, and that's great and very appreciated. More questions, keep the show going. So you can also do Rumble rants, and you can also Cash App me. But yeah, Cash App Caleb Moffitt 22. But the best way is to go to buymeacoffee.com. All right. So now we're going to finish this book. All right. We're going to start with we're on chapter 15, which is anti-revisionism as land socialism. In Russia, for the past 2 decades, especially since the special military operation in Ukraine, there has been a revival of interest in and admiration for Joseph Stalin. It fits in with the overall Soviet nostalgia and the defense of the Soviet Union against the narratives of Ukrainian ultranationalists and Western voices that portray it as nothing but a genocidal murder machine of famines and gulags. The bulk of the admiration of Stalin does not have a leftist character, though it is anti-capitalist and anti-Western. Morning Star, the British communist publication, warns its readers of mystical Stalinism, a trend of the Russian far right. The article, highlighting Edmund Griffith's book Alexander Prokhanov and Post-Soviet Esotericism, writes, traditional admirers of Stalin point to industrialization, collectivization, or the victory in World War II as the leader's achievements. Association with secret police and labor camps is more common among Stalin critics. How here that is turned on its head, and the repressive state of Yeltsin-era narratives, the repressive Stalin of Yeltsin-era narratives championed as a cry of rage against the new elite. That is only the start. Stalin, in the hands of Russian nationalists, can bear little resemblance to the historical Stalin. He becomes an incarnation of the mysterious Maid of Eurasia, among predecessors that include Ivan the Terrible and Genghis Khan, a figure whose historic task was to restore imperial unity after a period of fragmentation and upheaval, and an Arthuresque once and future king. They say that if you put your ear to the Volga steppe, you can hear his footsteps. Perhaps Stalin is already among us. We repeat like an incantation. He is at hand, he is near, he will return. Stalin's reinterpretation as a figure who, without changing the outer structures of the Soviet state, rebuilt Mother Russia from within, explains the appeal to the Putin-era Kremlin of what was once the patriotic opposition. Russian President Vladimir Putin is presented likewise as a gatherer of the Russian lands and has explicitly compared himself to Peter the Great in reclaiming territory for the motherland, in this case, Ukraine. Alexander Dugin, the leader of the Russian International or the Eurasian International Movement and widely influential Russian academic, has emphasized geopolitics, contrasting thalassocracy, empire of the sea, and tellerocracy, empire of the land. He interprets Stalin's defeat of Trotsky as the land civilization, asserting itself within communism and defeating the sea Marxism of Trotsky and Lenin. Stalin is believed by Dugin and many other anti-Western thinkers to be an expression of the civilization of the land repelling the empires of the sea. This fits a common theme in Russian history and literature going back hundreds of years. The idea is that the peoples of Russia and the surrounding countries have a deeply spiritual attachment to their land and thus have been able to repel foreign invaders. Tolstoy's classic of Russian literature, War and Peace, contains many passages alluding to this as it narrates the defeat of Napoleon in his 1812 invasion of Russia. Tolstoy wrote, "A people defending its land cannot be conquered by an army that has no roots in it. The invader depends on supply, order, and obedience. The defender depends on life itself, and life is stronger than any army." Kutuzov understood that the fate of the war was not decided by orders or maneuvers, but by the feeling of the people for the land that they were defending. He understood that an army was only the visible expression of the will of the people, and that to oppose that would mean destruction. The French soldiers stood on Russian soil as something alien, something hostile and lifeless. The Russian stood upon it as upon his own body, and therefore every step forward weakened the invader and strengthened those who belonged to the land. The Russian people burned their homes and destroyed their stores, not because they were ordered to do so, but because it was impossible for them to act otherwise. To leave one's bread to the enemy meant to cease to exist. And so the people destroyed what was theirs rather than allow it to serve the invader. The People's War rose with all its terrible and majestic force, without asking anyone's permission, without any plan, without regard for the rules. The people rose and destroyed the enemy. The club of the People's War rose, terrible in its simplicity, and struck down the French with all the force of its primitive strength. There was no question of rules, no conventions, no strategy. The enemy had come to take what was theirs, and they defended it with everything they had. Napoleon imagined that the conquest of Moscow would mean the conquest of Russia, but Russia was not Moscow. The strength of Russia lay not in the cities, not in institutions, but in the people who lived upon the land and who withdrew into it as the enemy advanced. Each peasant felt the land beneath his feet was his own, and that the enemy had come to take it. The Russian people rose against the invader, not because they were commanded to do so, but because it was impossible for them not to do so. All right. This is the guy who wrote those words that you just heard, Leo Tolstoy, the writer. That's him. And then this is an image of the Russian peasantry fighting off the French invaders. During the Second World War, Stalin very much worked to tap into these deeply held religious and mystical sentiments to defeat the foreign invaders. Films depicted Ivan the Terrible and Alexander Nevsky as great Russian patriotic heroes, not feudal czarist oppressors, as had been the previous Bolshevik line. During the war, Stalin legalized and sponsored the rebirth of the Russian Orthodox Church. His speeches referenced the faith of the Russian people as a vehicle through which the invaders could be defeated. If one interprets Stalinization of the Communist International as it becoming an expression of the land civilization repelling the empires of the sea, this forces us to ask what it means for American history. During the Popular Front years, the Communist Party USA embraced the worship of Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln had been a populist radical. At the time he was elected, he was a lawyer in the rural and newly settled territory of Illinois, who had developed a reputation for standing up for the common people. His speeches talked about capitalists who fleeced the people and referenced labor as being superior to capital. Lincoln's primary backers were free soilers, small farmers who wanted their own land and opposed slavery. But he embraced the labor movement at his famous Lincoln-Douglas debate, saying, "Thank God we live in a country where men have the right to strike." Lincoln had been embraced by the Marxist movement and even composed a message to the anti-slavery mass meeting in London, put on by the International Working Men's Association, the First International. Karl Marx sent a glowing letter to Lincoln congratulating him on his victory in the 1864 presidential election, saying, "The working men of Europe feel sure that as the American War of Independence initiated a new era of ascendancy for the middle class, so the American anti-slavery war will do for the working class. They consider it the earnest of the epoch to come that it fell to the lot of Abraham Lincoln, the single-minded son of the working class, to lead his country through the matchless struggle for the rescue of an enchained race and the reconstruction of a social world." But it's not in Lincoln's relationship with Marx, but in his much closer relationship with his economic advisor, Henry Charles Carey, that we see geopolitics being expressed. Carey's anti-slavery pamphlet, A Harmony of Interests, contrasts the English system of impoverishing nations and extracting wealth of the mighty navy with the American system of a national bank overseeing the development of a strong industrial nation. Describing his economic vision that repudiated the British Empire and viewed the Southern slaveocracy as an extension of it, Carey wrote, "To raise the value of labor throughout the world, we need only to raise the value of our own. To raise the value of land throughout the world, it is only needed that we adopt measures that shall raise the value of our own. To diffuse intelligence and promote the cause of morality throughout the world, we are required only to pursue the course that shall diffuse education throughout our land, and shall enable every man to more readily acquire property, and with it respect the rights of property. To improve the political condition of man throughout the world, it is needed that we ourselves should remain at peace, avoid taxation for the maintenance of fleets and armies, and become rich and prosperous. To raise the condition of women throughout the world, it is required of us that we pursue a course that enables men to remain at home and marry, that they may surround themselves with happy children and grandchildren. To substitute true Christianity for the detestable system known as Malthusianism, it is needed that we prove to the world that it is the population that makes food come from the rich soils, and that food tends to increase more rapidly than population, thus vindicating the policy of God to man. To prove that among the people of the world, whether agriculturists, manufacturers, or merchants, there is perfect harmony of interest, and that the happiness of individuals, as well as the grandeur of nations, is to be promoted by perfect obedience to that greatest of all commands, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. This is the object and will be the result of that mission. What Henry Charles Carey wrote seems to line up pretty well with the economic policies of socialism in one country. Rather than spreading global revolution, Stalin built a strong industrial economy on the land. He invested in the population, creating modern education system, healthcare, steel and oil industry. Stalin was particularly interested in increasing the population, with one of the highest medals he gave out being Mother of the Soviet Union, an honor reserved for women who gave birth to more than 10 children. Carey's harmony of interests between agriculturalists, manufacturers, and merchants, with a state that invests in them and balances their needs, sounds a lot like the program of people's democracies created across Eastern Europe after the defeat of the Nazis, or the bloc of four great classes in China, guided by the Communist Party that laid the foundation for the People's Republic of 1949. The Republican Party of Lincoln was a radical party that oversaw the defeat of slavery and a social revolution. Its slogan was free land, free labor, free men. After the Civil War, the Republican Party was divided, with the radical Republicans who sought to continue the anti-monopoly tradition of small farmers and labor unionists, forming the People's Party, commonly called the Populists. The Populists proliferated throughout the South, where impoverished blacks and whites wanted to continue to resist the power of plantation owners and redistribute the land. William Jennings Bryan emerged as a figure who pivoted the populist movement into the Democratic Party by inserting racist rhetoric and playing up the idea that Republicans had betrayed white workers. The rise of the lost cause nostalgia for the Confederacy across the South was created by the Democratic Party as a way of pulling white workers away from populism on the basis of maintaining segregation. Woodrow Wilson eventually created a propaganda film called The Birth of a Nation that was screened across America in 1915 and used to relaunch the Ku Klux Klan as a mass racist movement. The Ku Klux Klan was used to counter the labor unions and the Socialist Party of Eugene Debs while whipping rural white workers of the Midwest into a xenophobic hatred for Roman Catholics and Jews. But the populist movement had a continuing impact. And in the socialist movement of the 1900s, before the First World War, one can see a kind of land versus sea divide. The reformist socialists who ultimately supported the First World War tended to be New England liberals, who John Reed once referred to as people who think Karl Marx wrote a good antitrust law. The radical wing of the labor and socialist movement was the industrial workers of the world, the Wobblies, who were largely a phenomenon of Western states like Washington and Oregon. The Wobblies held free speech fights across the West, asserting their right to agitate on the street. In 1917, members of a breakaway organization of the IWW called the Working Class Union staged an uprising against the draft, refusing to fight in the First World War. The event has been dubbed the Green Corn Rebellion, as a kind of slur emphasizing Native American participation. The Green Corn Rebellion involved white, black, and Native workers refusing to be drafted and fight in Europe, aligning themselves with Rosa Luxemburg, Eugene Debs, and Vladimir Lenin as socialists who refused to sell out to imperialism against the majority of the Second International. And this is a photo of the Green Corn Rebellion in Oklahoma, when poor farmers and workers came together to refuse to fight in World War I and took up arms against the government, refusing to fight in World War I. The Green Corn Rebellion of 1917 in Oklahoma, out in Oklahoma. Huey Long, the populist Democrat in Louisiana, who became the governor and eventually a senator before being killed, was mentored by members of the Socialist Party in Louisiana who had populist roots. Huey Long's Share Our Wealth movement was opposed to the Communist Party, rejecting its labor union focus. The base of Huey Long's support in Louisiana was small farmers, for whom he paved the roads, provided school textbooks for their children, and provided other services paid for by heavy taxation of the Standard Oil Company. Huey Long is often dismissed by leftists as a fascist, but his career in politics began by supporting Catholics against the Ku Klux Klan within the Democratic Party. Black voter registration increased under Huey Long's governorship in Louisiana. Huey Newton's autobiography, Revolutionary Suicide, begins with the Black Panther leader, explaining that he was named after Huey Long, whom his parents admired for enabling Black women to become nurses and improving the conditions in the Black community of the state. Beyond America and beyond Russia, we can notice a kind of pattern that matches a geopolitical history. When civilizations of the land are besieged by empires, raiders, and conquerors of the sea, the people of the land, with their collectivist civilizational roots, resist, perhaps giving voice to a spiritual power that flows from the soil itself. When China was subdued by the British Empire, the 5,000-year-old civilization kept in chronic poverty by sea-based domination in 2 opium wars, resistance emerged. From 1850 to 1864, Hong Qianquan, a man who claimed to be the younger brother of Jesus Christ, mobilized hundreds of thousands of peasants to fight for the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, a kind of agrarian socialist utopia he promised to build. The Taiping Rebellion, often overlooked completely by Western historians, was one of the largest wars in history. The death toll is estimated at 20 to 30 million as the emperor battled against this peasant messiah. A generation later, Dr. Sun Yat-sen emerged as the father of Chinese nationalism, establishing the Chinese Republic and building a mass movement on the basis of his 3 principles: independence, democracy, and the people's livelihood. The third principle, the people's livelihood, was vaguely understood to be some notion of socialism. Dr. Sun Yat-sen admired Vladimir Lenin and even applied to join the Communist International, but was only granted observer status because he did not have a Marxist-Leninist worldview. After Sun Yat-sen's death in 1925, China saw the ascendancy of yet another land savior, the man who ultimately created the People's Republic after 25 years of war, mostly in the countryside. The definitive work of Mao Zedong in 1927 is his essay, Report on an Investigation into the Peasant Movement in Hunan Province. The piece is more than a report, as it was titled. It was a wild polemic. Mao Zedong, the communist activist who had worked at as a university librarian and a high school principal and merged his new People's Studies Society into the Communist Party at its founding gathering in 1921, was fuming with anger at his own comrades. He was calling them out for ignoring the peasant movement, a spark that he saw had the potential to light a prairie fire. Mao wrote, "For the present upsurge of the peasant movement is a colossal event. In a very short time, in China's central, southern, and northern provinces, several 100 million peasants will rise like a mighty storm, like a hurricane, a force so swift and violent that no power, however great, will be able to hold it back. They will smash all the trammels that bind them and rush forward on the road to liberation. They will sweep all the imperialist warlords, corrupt officials, local tyrants, and evil gentry into their graves. Every revolutionary party and every revolutionary comrade will be put to the test, to be accepted or rejected as they decide. There are three alternatives: to march at their head and lead them, to trail behind them, gesticulating and criticizing, or stand in their way and oppose them. Every Chinese is free to choose, but events will force you to make the choice quickly." Mao Zedong was from the countryside of this very province, born into a somewhat well-off family, and he knew his people. The communists had been reluctant to work with the peasant rebels, seeing them as ignorant and barbaric. Trotsky had said China couldn't have a revolution because the industrial working class was too small. Stalin had urged the Communist Party to merge into the KMT nationalist movement as a pro-Soviet faction. Mao Zedong saw the future of China lay in the explosion of resistance against poverty and a long outdated feudal system among the peasant majority. He defended the violence of the peasant rebels, saying, "A revolution is not a dinner party, or writing an essay, or painting a picture, or doing an embroidery. Cannot be so refined, so leisurely and gentle, so temperament kind, courteous, restrained, and magnanimous. A revolution is an insurrection, an act of violence by which one class overthrows another." Han Suyin's biography of Mao Zedong, The Morning Deluge, tells of a bold young man who challenged his father's authority and went to the city to study, forming his own activist group that boycotted Japanese goods and taught Kropotkinist anarchism as its ideology. The young teacher recruited lost and forgotten people, teenage girls who had refused arranged marriages and run away to the cities, students who wanted a cause to fight for, and intellectuals attracted to the achievements of the Soviet Union. After 6 years of organizing in the cities, Chiang Kai-shek's betrayal and white terror, smashing the communists as a faction of the nationalist movement and slaughtering hundreds of thousands, the movement went to the countryside. In the countryside, Mao Zedong built the People's Liberation Army and captured the imagination of so many. Edgar Snow's interview with the leader of the mysterious Red Bandit Army presented an image of a Robin Hood-like figure who had brought people from different regions, classes, and social backgrounds together into a new fighting force committed to building a new China. Agnes Smedley, Anna Louise Strong, Edgar Snow, William Hinton, and so many of the authors who observed the Red Army up close from 1927 to when it established the People's Republic in 1949 couldn't help but compare it to early Christianity. Mao Zedong seemed to be like Christ in calling on people to leave their possessions and family behind and take up the cross for the salvation of their nation, at minimum looking death right in the face, with many dying in the process. In the 1950s, the CIA's MKUltra program would spend billions of taxpayer dollars searching for the secrets of what they assumed must be some magical Asian voodoo that made people into selfless foot soldiers for the communist cause. Hollywood films like The Manchurian Candidate were attempts to make sense of it. This law of history, of people of the land fighting back and utilizing their collective power, often led by some kind of messianic figure to assert themselves against raiders of the sea, can be found in so many contexts. E. Michael Jones' text, Barren Metal, A History of Capitalism and the Conflict Between Labor and Usury, explains on July 23rd, 1745, the same year that Pope Benedict XIV issued Vix Preventum, reaffirming the traditional Catholic Church teaching on usury, Charles Edward Stuart, the 24-year-old scion of the Stuart line, was put on shore by French sailors at Modart on the western shores of Scotland with 7 followers. It seemed unlikely, both militarily and mathematically, that this small group would overthrow the Hanoverian monarchy in Great Britain. But that was their intention, as they went from one clan to another, drumming up support in the Highlands of Scotland for regime change south of the River Clyde. The Highlands were a primitive feudal society, which meant that the Bonnie Prince Charlie had an initial advantage in raising troops. He didn't need large sums of money to pay for mercenaries. All he needed to do was convince the lords and that their cause was just, and they could in turn send their vassals to fight. The lords could command labor directly without the intermediary of money, which was controlled by the usurers and bankers of the South. Their vassals were ready in their use of traditional weapons like the claymore or the two-handed sword, which would wreak havoc and mayhem during the early stage of the Rising of 1745. This, more than anything else, explains the rapidity with which the Jacobite army came into being in the Highlands of Scotland as the reason for their initial success. If the Highlanders could surprise their foes and engage them at close quarters, they had a distinct military advantage. The conflict was portrayed as religious, but it was, in fact, economic. In psychoanalytic terms, the return of British soil to the grandson of James II could be termed the return of the repressed. Even if it took on religious overtones, this discomfiture had an economic basis that stretched back to the looting of church property and the enclosure crisis, which had dispatched the rural population from the land, which had been the source of their sustenance. Jones explains how the Duke of Cumberland's forces turned the tide, crushing the uprising with brutality. When Cumberland's forces met with the last remnants of the retreating Jacobite army at Culloden Moor outside Inverness on April 16th, 1746, the Jacobite army was routed, and the slaughter that ensued earned Cumberland the sobriquet Butcher. The Jacobites, who did not die in the heat of the battle, were systemically executed. The policy of cold-blooded murder that began in the heat of the battle continued long after the clamor of battle had died down. Charles Edward's men fought according to the established rules and would not finish off anyone off the field of battle. But more than a month after Culloden, Bland, another of Cumberland's officers, continued to believe that it was better to kill Jacobite soldiers than maintain them as prisoners. 4 Scottish lairds were beheaded at the Tower of London, and 116 captured soldiers were hanged until not dead and then drawn and quartered, often under the approving eye of King George II. Lesser measures such as transportation and death in prison led to the disappearance of over 3,400 men, women, and children. Prince Charlie escaped from the slaughter at Culloden Moor, and after a number of adventures, amorous and otherwise, eventually sailed back to France. The fight of Bonnie Prince Charlie, in which he took on disguises and was protected by the Scots, is the subject of much Scottish poetry and song for generations to come. One song, Ways Me for Prince Charlie, reflects on the tragedy of the king watching his people slaughtered as he fled in hiding. On hills that are by right his ain, he roams a lonely stranger. On every side he's pressed by want. On every side is danger. Jones explained how Cumberland's army escalated to genocide against the Scottish Highlanders. Quote, once he was gone, the Whig forces turned to longer-term measures to ensure the repressed would not return again. Those measures ranged from disarming the Highlanders and making them give up their native dress to burning crops, seizing livestock, and on occasion attacking entire communities, including old people and children, men and women. After defeating the Jacobite army at Culloden, Cumberland's soldiers then waged war on the civilian population of the Highlands, destroying homes, raping women, and burning the crops of anyone who was suspected of Jacobite sympathies. Cumberland's war on the defeated Highlanders included an attempt to destroy their economy and starve them to death. Adam Smith, the father of free trade and the invisible hand, was a Scotsman who studied at Oxford in 1745 as the Jacobite uprising was raging across the Highlands. As Jones explained, Adam Smith was on the defensive as a Protestant Scotsman studying among the English amid the war. Needless to say, it was not a good time to be a Scot at Oxford. On the one hand, Scottish people were regarded as dirty and barbaric by the English. But on the other hand, the lowland Scots, because of their allegiance to the Hanoverian usurpers, were seen and held in even less esteem. As the Highlanders were being slaughtered, the Scottish Society for Propagating Christian Knowledge was formed by Presbyterians who established schools for children in which their native language of Gaelic was forbidden and beaten out of them, and they were forcibly converted away from Catholicism. As Jones explains, the agents who carried out these measures were called Presbyterians, but the real cause that motivated these reformers was commerce. Their goal was the goal of these new policies was the promotion of capitalism. The way the Highlanders were slaughtered and ethnically cleansed is similar to how Atlanticist colonizers would wipe out ethnic groups that resisted them across the world, such as Native Americans, Africans, and peoples across Asia. Eventually, Smith finished his studies at Oxford and set up in Glasgow, a port city in his homeland. Glasgow had been a bastion of Protestantism in Scotland. There was no uprising there when the usurper William of Orange took the throne in 1688, because the sea adventurers who were the driving force behind the city's remarkable economic expansion of the 17th and 18th centuries were firmly committed to Protestant exploitation of the colonies, which the Protestants had opened up in both America and Ulster. From Glasgow, Smith wrote his screeds on the civilizing influence of commerce and how free trade in the British Empire system could lift primitive peoples out of their savagery. The savages that Adam Smith was writing about were his own people, being slaughtered, forced to flee to the Americas, and outright exterminated, as the land they'd lived on for centuries was turned into private property. Smith is recognized today as the father of classical economics and modern notions of free market and the invisible hand. If one listens to the traditional music of Appalachia, many songs refer to a heroic or handsome figure known as Charlie. This is because these were songs that Scots brought with them to America when fleeing or being exiled to the Highlands. Charlie is Charles Edward Stuart, dubbed by the English as the Great Pretender, the king the Scots sought to install on the throne in London in the Jacobite revolt. After his defeat, Bonnie Prince Charlie became a semi-mythical figure among the defeated Scots, referred to in almost Arthurian terms. Charlie will come again, say the lyrics to the Sky Boat song. Bring back my Bonnie to me, says another anthem. The Jacobite uprising was not Scottish nationalism, but a battle for the future of all Britain. But out of the crushing defeat and genocide of the Highlanders, as part of the process that Marx called primitive accumulation, in which millions of Scots were killed or driven away, and the myth of Bonnie Prince Charlie and the eventual political current of Scottish nationalism was created. In the following generations, Robert Burns and Robert Louis Stevenson would compose poetry hailing Charles Stuart in highly romantic terms, as the people of the Scottish Highlands were besieged by the emerging sea-based Glasgow-London capitalism they had resisted. They had rallied around their Bonnie Prince as a land messiah, and generations after his death, his legend generated mighty passion among the Scots. Based on his interpretation of many ancient religions, mythologies, and cultures, the Italian far-right intellectual Julius Evola wrote in his post-World War II text, Man Among the Ruins, ancient primitive man essentially obeyed not the strongest members of society, but those in whom he perceived a saturation of mana, a sacred energy and life force, and who, for this reason, seemed to him best qualified to perform activities usually precluded to others. To depend on such leaders constituted not the subjugation, but rather the elevation of a person. the cult of personality condemned by Khrushchev, and now a fixation of liberal opposition to totalitarianism, warning of the danger of mass movements, seems to be a direct inoculation against the kind of leader, a figure like Stalin or Mao or Lincoln or Bonnie Prince Charlie, that can inject a sacred energy and life force and repel the empires of the sea. All of this gives us a fresh lens beyond the limits of Marxism, Leninism, and dialectical materialism to understand Joseph Stalin and the wider battle against revisionism within the Marxist movement from the late 1800s to the Cold War. That's the end of the final chapter. And so now we'll read the conclusion of the book. On July 29th, 2022, the FBI violently raided seven cities, not in New York City or Southern California, On July 29th, 2022, the FBI violently raided 7 sites, not in New York City or in Southern California, but in St. Petersburg, Florida, and St. Louis, Missouri. All of the sites were associated with an organization called the African People's Socialist Party, or the Uhuru Movement. The FBI announced the raids were conducted and an indictment was pending against the leaders of the organization, not for any criminal activity, but for allegedly acting as foreign agents of Russia with their speech. Articles published on the group's website, Zoom calls with Russian diplomats, and participation in an anti-globalization conference in 2013 were cited as proof of an alleged conspiracy to oppose U.S. foreign policy. The day of the raids, the Center for Political Innovation, which had almost no contact with the Uhuru movement prior, called them and offered unequivocal support. Uhuru activists in St. Louis drove to Chicago the next week, where CPI greeted them with an auditorium full of activists chanting, "No more raids." The conference in Chicago was featured in Newsweek magazine under the headline, "American Socialists Fly Pro-Putin Flags at Conference." I was quoted by Newsweek saying, "We at CPI celebrate the great moment in history where Russia, China, and America stood together to defeat fascism. Those are the politics we want to revive." Tara Reid, an American journalist who had once worked as a staffer for U.S. President Joe Biden and refused to back down from her documented and verified allegation of sexual assault, attended the conference and accepted an award. She was quoted by Newsweek as saying, "Russia is not the enemy, neither is China. I believe that U.S. imperialism has done what U.S. imperialism has done to many countries of the world. Systemic damage to infrastructure and violence of U.S.-funded weapons has cost millions of lives." She said she was deeply honored and touched that CPI had chosen to honor her. Tara Reid had not heard about the FBI raids on the Uhuru house until she met Uhuru activists at our conference. As someone whose mother had been in the new communist movement and worked with the Progressive Labor Party, Tara was horrified to hear that Black activists were being targeted for their support of Russia. Tara immediately contacted her friend and supporter, Tucker Carlson. In the final week before he was removed from the airwaves of Fox News, Tucker Carlson, a lifelong Republican and conservative, did stories highlighting the Uhuru case and offering his support to Chairman Omali Yeshitela, Jesse Neville, and Penny Hess, who were soon indicted and facing 15 years in prison for their alleged speech dubbed acting as a foreign agent. Days before the conference, I spoke with a former associate of CPI who used words that seemed like blackmail, saying, "You're going to have to cancel the conference multiple times," promising to embarrass me on the internet with childish gossip and innuendo about my personal life. Tara Reid received mysterious messages also urging her not to attend the gathering, but the conference went ahead. We presented our award to Tara Reid, and Uhuru was welcomed to thunderous applause as we honored them and promised our full support against the FBI. 2 weeks after the conference, I was defamed across the internet, videos with hundreds of thousands of views, saying outright falsehoods, calling me a rapist, and claiming my anti-imperialist activism was all an elaborate scheme to get sexual favors were blasted across the internet. I went silent for 3 months and let the storm blow over. CPI relaunched in November, and by February, we were in full swing as sponsors of the Rage Against the War Machine rally in Washington, D.C., hosting a post-rally reception for Scott Ritter. At the end of February, we held a press conference at the United Nations sponsored by the Russian mission, highlighting the Uhuru case and why we felt it was unjust intimidation, making Americans afraid to do what we were planning to do and visit Russia. As the chairman of the National Preparatory Committee of the World Youth Festival, I raised the case as an example of the hypocrisy of the American government that lectures the world about free speech and was trying to give itself a new woke makeover as a bastion of anti-racism, all while trying to imprison Black activists for their anti-imperialist speech. When the Uhuru defendants went to federal court in Tampa, I was in front of the courthouse addressing the press the day the trial started. They were acquitted on the main charge of acting as foreign agents, but convicted on a lesser charge of conspiracy to defraud the American government. When the judge announced no prison time and no fines, as the Uhuru defendants appealed their case, and Chairman O'Malley, Jesse Neville, and Penny Hess walked out of the federal courthouse triumphant, I was there in the courtroom with the celebrating crowd. Recently, the judge granted early release from probation, and it appears the entire trial will soon be voided by federal appeals courts. The whole time I mobilized the innovationist community to support the Uhuru 3, I was forced to ask the question, where are the communists? 3 of their own, socialist Black liberation activists, were facing over a decade in prison for their speech. The Communist Party did almost nothing. The Party for Socialism and Liberation went as far as trying to block a Uhuru rally in Washington, D.C., contesting their permits. Wherever the case was raised on the leftist internet, rumors and gossip conflating the Uhuru movement with another organization and calling it a cult shut down any effort to build up mainstream leftist support. Much like what was done to the Revolutionary Communist Party after its busing position, or the National Caucus of Labor Committees when it broke with the mainstream of the left, or has been done to the Center for Political Innovation from the moment we were launched, the Uhuru movement has always been subjected to a kind of blacklisting and shunning by the socialists who control what calls itself leftism in America. Chairman O'Malley, as an organizer of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in the 1960s, spoke in support of the Palestinians against Israel. As Uhuru activists are happy to tell you, the mainstream of the civil rights movement was dependent on Zionist money and would not allow solidarity with the Arab peoples. Ever since having the courage to call out his own people's struggle, how his own people's struggle had been manipulated by sinister forces who are not honest about their real goals, Chairman O'Malley has been a target of what he calls the white left. When I visited the Uhuru House in St. Petersburg, Florida, I heard a phrase that has become a mantra within the Uhuru movement. We are winning. Even though their leaders were facing 15 years in prison and the scores of FBI agents had raided their facilities, I saw nothing but smiles on the faces of Uhuru activists. The work of the Uhuru movement is completely different than what is being done by woke activists who burned cities in Minneapolis and Baltimore after being prompted by CNN. The Uhuru movement runs a farmer's market, providing fresh organic fruits and vegetables to the local Black community. They also provide classes and services for pregnant women in the area. Chairman O'Malley and his movement are not Malthusians. They want to increase the population. They want to build. Bakeries, furniture stores, prison reentry programs, and so much more are part of the Black Power Blueprint, the vision for empowering the impoverished African Americans of the United States while teaching that their movement is part of a global struggle against colonialism, of which the emerging Union of Sahel states, as well as Russia, China, Iran, Cuba, and Venezuela, are strong outposts. It's no wonder that the sneering Trotskyites wouldn't defend Chairman O'Malley when the FBI targeted him. He's not a pessimist. As angry as he most surely is about the injustices he's experienced in his life, Chairman O'Malley is not preaching hate or resentment. He is mobilizing to build and construct while presenting a vision of a world beyond globalism and imperialism. I disagree with the Uhuru movement on some theoretical points, but I look at this vibrant anti-imperialist movement that has withstood a horrendous attack from the U.S. government, and it fits what I have come to understand about the nature of history. I see Chairman O'Malley, over 80 years old, but in his prime physical condition, as he fearlessly stood up to the FBI, as a man who gives voice to great civilizational forces. among the descendants of slaves in the vast territories of North America, impoverished, imprisoned, and inculcated with pessimism, a leader has emerged to construct and build in the Black community, exuding a life force that emboldens many to step up and stand with him. I'm also forced to think about my own experiences as a young man from a small town in Ohio. I did not come from a communist family. My grandparents are Republicans, and my upbringing was quite conservative in a small town of less than 10,000 residents, centered around a jelly factory surrounded by cornfields. The entire reason I became attracted to socialism was because it made sense economically. Why should human labor power be wasted? Why should poverty be created by abundance? When I learned by seeing basic economic data that this mantra of American society, that communism just doesn't work, was false, I was filled with anger. I read about Stalin's 5-year plans that turned Russia into a superpower. I read about how China is the second largest economy in the world and has lifted 800 million people from poverty. I discovered the works of Anna Louise Strong and discovered that, like me, she is a Midwesterner, descended from preachers in the Second Great Awakening, the mass spiritual movement that prepared the ground for Abraham Lincoln to lead the struggle to smash slavery. When I read Anna Louise Strong's memoir, I Change Worlds, and her book rebutting Khrushchev's defamations, The Stalin Era. I joined communist groups as a teenager and got involved in the messy and confused remnants of communism in America. After college, due to international connections, in 2015, I found myself on a medical aid ship from the Iranian Red Crescent Society in the Gulf of Aden, bound for Yemen, surrounded by Shia Muslims who wanted to talk to me about the Bible, fearing for my life as warplanes flew overhead and the port we were destined for was bombed. I reached out to God, whom I had learned about in Sunday school as a child, and found him once again. I then had the privilege of seeing Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Syed Khamenei, speak to thousands of Iranians at a mausoleum where the founder of the Islamic Republic is buried. I saw teenagers in military uniforms and impoverished people from rural Iran and other parts of the Middle East extend their hands to him and shout, "The blood in my vessels belongs to the supreme leader. The blood in my vessels belongs to the supreme leader," as he entered the room. If it wasn't for the Islamic Revolution and its construction jihad, which very much resembled Stalin's 5-year plans, these people would not have running water or electricity in their homes. I felt something that cannot be put into words. There is a deep spiritual power in anti-imperialism. And I felt it in the collectivos of Central Caracas with Ana Kona, an 18-year-old girl who directed security at Comuna El Penal, when she told me she believed Jesus Christ had brought her into the world to die for Hugo Chavez and Bolivarianism. The reason I had never fit in with the Trotskyites and crypto-Zionists who ran American communism was because I did not want to wreck and destroy. My socialism had not come from resentment and pessimism, but from the very soil I had grown up on. I was determined to build the Center for Political Innovation as a new form of anti-imperialism, a movement that would embrace the American people and the only future that America has, joining the new world beyond imperialism and breaking out of the old order rooted in colonialism and the rule of international bankers. The historic reality that can almost be called a law is this: when a civilization of the land is besieged by empires of the sea, from the soil arises a spiritual power, which the people draw from to defend their land and pull together in collective struggle. Such movements tend to be led by messianic figures, land saviors, some of whom fail and others who succeed in rallying to free the land and enable the people to build and construct once again. This law is clear when one looks at the history of Russia and China and many other countries. And I think it very much applies to the United States of America. And that will become clear in the coming decades. And that's my new book, Mystical Stalinism. So order your copy of it. A lot of photos in there, a lot of images you didn't see. Also an appendix about the future of CPI and what we plan to do. Order your copy today. Mystical Stalinism and the Struggle Against Revisionism in America. So there you go. That's my new book. So thanks for letting me read my new book to you all on the stream. Let's do the roll call. Names and locations. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who's with us? Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who's with us? Who is with us? Who's with us? Names and locations. Cameron in New Hampshire. John McCarthy in Chicago. Nasser in Los Angeles. Boise, Idaho. Rose for peace and prosperity. Very, very good. Very, very good. Patch in Arizona. Jose in California. Bradley in Los Angeles. John in Florida. Good to see you. Good to see you. Good to see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Tampa, Florida. Herb. Good to see you. Al in Sydney, Australia. Jane in New Zealand. Good to see you. Jenny in Cincinnati. Good to see you. Gabby in Chicago. Good to see you. Bill in Tasmania. Victoria in Australia. Good to see you. Good book. Well, go buy it. Go buy it. Names and locations. Long Beach. Good to see you. Good to see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with you? Who is with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. Anybody else? Anybody else? All right. Well, listen, folks. It looks like a few more questions have come in, which is good. We've got a few more coffees that have come in. We got 2 Rumble rants to go over. And somebody bought 20 coffees, which is awesome, right? It's great. If anyone else wants to send any questions, go to Buy Me a Coffee, buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin, and I'm going to start answering people's questions. And then that'll be our show for tonight. So yeah, good to see you all. Good to see you all. Reminder, we will be in the streets this weekend across America saying hands off Iran. The Center for Political Innovation, which is our organization, we are going to be bringing our message of no war with Iran to the streets of America. So join the Center for Political Innovation. Get involved. Here, I'll just quickly put on a really short video showing some of our CPI activities. And then I will start answering the questions. So send any more questions that you got. This is just a really quick, really quick video. Here we go. Yep, that's us. Join the Center for Political Innovation. So now I'm going to start answering people's questions, right? You can send them in. We're going to start with Buy Me a Coffee. The first question came from John McCarthy. He said, today is Tara Reid's birthday. Well, Tara Reid is awesome. We love Tara Reid. Every time I go to Russia, I see her. Last time I was in Russia, we had coffee, and I actually I gave her this book of everything CPI has been doing. This is the proceedings book of our convention. I gave her this and a couple copies. I gave her one for Cynthia McKinney, the congresswoman who goes to Russia pretty frequently. I'm a huge fan of Cynthia McKinney. She just tweeted out my exchange with the U.S. State Department over Russia and was very, she really did that, and I really appreciated that. And that was really awesome. And we love Tara Reid. She's really, really cool. We gave her an award for her work standing with Russia, her work exposing Joe Biden, and she's been through a lot. They've tried to kill her horse, and they've done a lot of nasty stuff to her, but she has stood strong. She's got a daughter, Iran. She's got family and she's in Russia. She's a Russian citizen now. She got her passport. They gave her her passport. And Tara Reid is a really good person, and we really like Tara Reid. We really like Tara Reid. So there you go. There we go. Yeah, thank you, John. And it was like a weird spiritual, like that conference, which Garland, who's I guess in the chat, Garland Nixon was a speaker at, but that conference in 2022. That conference, it's like, I hate to get like overly spiritual and overly idealist, because I know that's not where everyone's at, but that was the first time I ever met Tara Reid, was at that conference. That was the first time, that was right after the Uhuru movement got raided. Nick Brana came to that conference. Garland Nixon came to that conference and spoke. I got blackmailed to prevent me from doing that conference. And it was like, it wasn't that big. It was about 75 people. It wasn't even 100 people there. But it was mentioned in Newsweek magazine. The FBI was all over it like you wouldn't believe. But we came together and we did that conference. And it led to the Uhuru movement being mentioned on Tucker Carlson's show. It inspired the Rage Against the War Machine protests that happened in Washington, D.C. So much can be traced back to that room. If you were in that room, you really, like, you were in the middle of history right there. Tara Reid is now a Russian citizen. You were in the middle of history. And there's a reason the FBI was trying to stop it. And both Tara and I were getting like crazy messages urging us not to be there and trying to get us to cancel the conference and the Uhuru movement. And it was CPI. We are a small organization. I'm not going to pretend we're some huge group. We're not. We might be bigger than UNAC, but we're not huge. But if you're in CPI, you are involved in world events, right? We have spoken. Two of our members, myself and Noah, have both met and spoken with Russian President Putin at a historic world gathering in Sochi, Russia. I have interviewed the president of Iran, Ibrahim Raisi. I was in the middle of an international incident bringing medical aid to Yemen on an Iranian ship. That's just the tip of the iceberg. We were heavily involved in the Uhuru case, which was an internationally widely watched case. We've given United Nations press conferences. Like, we're the real deal, right? We're the real deal. And we're anti-revisionists. We're people of the land. We are. And that was kind of the point of my book, right? That it's much deeper than communism versus capitalism. Within communism, you had globalism and Trotskyism, and then you had civilization of the land, people of the land fighting back. CPI, we are people of the land fighting back. We wrote a book about the Houthis, and we distributed thousands of copies, like 4,000 copies of this have just been handed out. There's a section of this book we wrote on the Houthis. It's this same thesis, right? About civilizations of the land and civilizations of the sea, right? And, in this book, we talk about, there's a section called People of the Land Fighting Back, right? I have the Houthis with their guns, right? And people of the land fighting back, right? And we have an understanding. We have introduced the Houthis to thousands of Americans, right? We have a whole pamphlet. It's less than 100 pages long. And we just gave it to them about who the Houthis are. We had somebody join CPI in Chicago, an old man. And he'd been given one of these books at a rally, and he had just put it on his shelf, and then he opened it, and he was blown away. And I got a phone call in the middle of the day from this elderly man in Chicago, and he said, "I have to join your group. I read this pamphlet. This is something else." Like, we were going to every corner of America to educate people about the Houthis, about what the Houthis stand for, what the Houthis believe. Can you believe that's us? That's CPI, right? We do what no one else does. I'll just tell you that much. No one's doing what we're doing. And we are gearing up for a weekend of big actions. We are not going to let this war with Iran happen, right? And Penny, shout out to Penny. Penny is our member out in Minneapolis. She's organized a whole local out there. There's a good group of people, Gary, Tom, and a whole group of people. So they went out yesterday and they hit the streets. They postered up the town. No war for Epstein. Iran is not our enemy. It's amazing. They couldn't even wait till Saturday, right? They're so excited. Good for them. Good. We need to get this message out there, right? And so, they were postering up the whole neighborhood. No war for Epstein. Iran is not our enemy, right? Penny is, they're doing it. They're doing it, right? And she's doing posters all over Minneapolis, right? This is real anti-imperialism, right? Like, all over telephone polls, don't attack Iran. America doesn't want Epstein's war. Center for Political Innovation. We're doing it. folks. We're doing it. We're doing it. We're not pandering to wokeism. We're building a movement of people of the land. Gabby's making her poster right now. I just got the poster that we're using here in New York City in the mail, and it's huge, right? And it's going to be awesome. You all are going to love it, right? You know, we're going to have people out in the street in many different cities. LA has got big plans ahead. People are making their posters, right? We are going to stand against this war, right? This war shall not pass, right? They're not going to go to war with Iran, you know, to serve Jeffrey Epstein and serve the Mossad and serve Israel, right? And we know who's, you know, just like they went after Chairman O'Malley because he wouldn't go along with the Mossad controlled white left, as he calls it, right? We wouldn't go along with the Mossad controlled left, like UNAC, like Answer, right? You know, those groups are controlled by the Mossad, right? And we're not going along with it, right? And we're building a socialism that doesn't hate America, doesn't hate working people in this country. We're people of the land fighting back. We're Henry Charles Carey and the tradition of the American Revolution. We're the American system of, you know, of building up a strong economy in the land, investing in the nation, right? A national bank, infrastructure, dispersing education, right? That's what Stalin was doing with his 5-year plans. That's what Khomeini did with his construction jihad. That's what they're doing in Nicaragua now with their micro entrepreneurship program. Socialism in Nicaragua. What do? They set up a national bank and they're investing in the community and investing in the land. And they wiped out illiteracy, providing education, and they're enabling people to start their own businesses, commerce upon the land. They're increasing the population. And they're urging people to grow where you are planted. Don't pile into the cities. It's a slogan they have painted. I've been to Nicaragua. In Nicaragua, one of the slogans is grow where you are planted. And they're trying to build up the countryside, the rural areas, right? They're investing in the land. I'm telling you, this is so much bigger than capitalism and communism. This is so much bigger than capitalism and communism and Marxism. That's part of it. That's like one side of it. You have to imagine a blind man and an elephant, right? There's a blind man and there's a group of blind men and they all go and they try to touch an elephant. And one blind man says the elephant's a snake because he touches the trunk. And one blind man says the elephant is flat because he touches its stomach. One, you know, they all are right. They're all seeing different parts of it, but it's so much bigger. This is about the globalist empires of the sea, the satanic globalist Atlanticist order coming down and the civilization of the land asserting itself and fighting back and building and constructing. Center for Political Innovation, we are the real deal. We are having our national convention this summer in Chicago, right? And I shout out to Noah who designed the poster, right? This is the poster that we've got, right? And again, we love our country. The message is, this is the poster for our convention. The dream will be fulfilled. Peace, innovation, and multipolarity. That's going to be the theme for the convention. Isn't that awesome? Look at that, right? Noah designed that. Shout out to Noah, one of our beloved members in Boston. That's the movement we're building, right? We are the future of America, right? We're not the burn it down, tear it down left. We are people of the land fighting back. We draw from the spiritual power that arises from the very soil of the land, and we will repel the raiders of the sea. And we will invest in community and build up the population and build up prosperity and abundance for all. Dare to struggle, dare to win. Next question. Anonymous writer sent me a coffee and he didn't put a message with it. Well, thank you, Anonymous. I appreciate it. I would have answered a question if you'd have sent one. And then Ian C sent me 20 coffees. 20 coffees. That's a lot of coffees, man. Don't you find it infuriating how the so-called left hates peaceful nuclear power, but thinks World War III for liberalism and LGBT is cool? They hate nuclear power to save humanity, but they're okay with it potentially ending humanity. That's interesting. That's an irony there. Yeah. No, I mean, I can't get over the fact that the Democrats they wouldn't stand up for Trump, saying perfectly sensible things like, children shouldn't be ripped out of their parents' arms and have their gender changed without their approval. I think that's, you can be super pro-trans, pro-LGBT and still say, yeah, you can't rip kids out of their parents' arms and change their gender without their approval. Democrats wouldn't stand up for that. Right? You can be totally in favor of a very liberal immigration policy, but Trump said, I think the government should prioritize the citizens over people who entered the country illegally. They wouldn't stand up for that. Trump said all kinds of very sensible things. They wouldn't stand up for it. But then he started lying out his ass about Iran and saying that Iran is going to get a nuclear weapon. They just have to say they'll never get a nuclear weapon. They've said that for 47 years. He just lied out of his ass, and all of them were there applauding. Yeah, it's okay to stand up for war with Iran. It's not okay to stand up for maybe kids shouldn't be taken away from their parents and have their gender changed without the parents' approval. It's not okay to stand up for government prioritizing citizens over people that entered the country illegally. Like, I mean, there's just like, it's like amazing, right? Like, I mean, I hear what you're saying. Look, I can rant and rave about the left, and it gets depressing, and I do it too much. And so I don't want to do it too much. But yeah, we're doing something different, right? But that's what Lenin meant when he said lower and deeper to the real masses. We're not going to beg for a place in socialism, right? And that's, I in the earlier chapters that I read, like last night, where I talked about the RCP. The RCP had the right approach. When the RCP did their rally for 1776, for 1976, we've carried the rich for 200 years. They had the right approach, right? We've carried the rich for 200 years. Now let's dump them off our backs. And then, we won't fight another rich man's war. They had the right approach. Forget the left, recruit the people. But then, things spiraled out of control, and eventually Bob Avakian went to a Jimmy Buffett concert and smoked, or I guess he didn't smoke pot. He inhaled a lot of secondhand smoke, and he decided that, we got to be part of the left. And now that's that, right? But yeah, I mean, we're building a movement of the people of the land fighting back. Iran is not our enemy. Iran is not our enemy. Epstein and the Israel lobby, that's the enemy of America. Oh, John bought another coffee. You should interview Neturei Karta or the Iranian rabbis. Rabbi Weiss, Mordecai Weiss, is that his name? Mordecai Weiss or Rabbi Weiss. He has been on this. I have interviewed him many times, on this channel, or on like the street. I haven't done like regular web interviews with him. I've just interviewed him on the street. He knows me by face. But let me see. Maybe I might have a video of him. Yeah. Well, this isn't Rabbi Weiss. This is another anti-Israel Jew from Neturei Karta. But yeah, I've interviewed them many times, and Rabbi Weiss knows me by face. Usually when I'm at anti-war rallies, he'll always give me an interview. He's a really good guy, and he's a true Jew, right? He follows the Torah, and he rejects the Talmud. He says the Talmud is not legitimate. He follows the Torah, and the Jewish teaching is that Israel can only be created by the Messiah, and that Israel is the Antichrist in his view, right? If you try to create Israel falsely, right? That's evil, right? That's Satan. And so he is very, very opposed to Israel. And he says that, the Torah forbids the Jewish people from having a nation until until the Messiah creates it. And so that Israel is the ultimate blasphemy. That's his perspective as a true Jew, right? That's very admirable. But anyway, yeah, this is an interview I did with Neturei Karta when they were out in front of the White House.
Outside the White House, while the Palestinian President Abbas is meeting with President Trump, they are meeting on the issue of Palestine, which is a critical, important issue, and we hope and we pray that this be successful with the utmost success. We are making a statement here today that as Jewish people we are standing here welcoming Palestinian President Abbas because we want to clarify that Jews are not in conflict with Palestine. We were never in conflict in Palestine. We lived in Palestine, our people lived in Palestine in peace, and we can live in peace. We should live in peace, and hopefully we will live in peace. But we have to understand that nothing the state of Israel presents, nothing of those actions, none of those people represent our people, the Jewish people, or the Jewish religion. Yes, you have some people of Jewish descent unfortunately claiming to represent me and my people, unfortunately misusing my religion. Non-religious people, anti-religious people, misusing my religion.
Yeah. good for him. I mean, that's great. That guy's from Notori Card. It's not Rabbi Weiss, who I often see. Let me see if I can find Rabbi Weiss. I've interviewed him on this channel many times, but I don't think I think I have to like pull up a Palestine rally or something. Right? Yeah, I think yeah, I've interviewed them a number of times, but I ought to just have them on, you know, just do an interview with them. So yeah, that would be good. All right. So yeah, if anyone wants to send any more questions, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin. You know, that would be great. You know, go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin, or you can do Rumble Rants, or you can cash at me at Caleb Maupin 22. Now, Rumble Rants are next. So we have two of those. Penny sent a German visit to China video. All right. German visit to China. What Germany's mayors says as he wraps up China with a key Unitree tour to see China-made robots. Okay. All right. So we'll put that video of the German chancellor visiting China. We'll put that on here. We'll put Penny's video on in a second. Thank you for sending that, Penny. You always have good, like newsy kind of videos to put on. So thank you for doing that. Always appreciated. Always appreciated. All right. Got to download it another way. All right. Okay. All right. All right. So we got mayors in China. Okay. All right. All right. Okay.
Ich fahre mit vielen guten Eindrücken nach Hause und mit vielen Aufgaben, die wir noch zusammen zu bewältigen haben. Es hat sich gelohnt, diesen Besuch zu machen. Es war eine gute Abend. Wir sollten einfach die Beziehungen zu China festigen. Ich bin jedenfalls dazu entschlossen, das zu tun. Das gilt für die politischen Gespräche, das gilt aber auch für die ökonomische Zusammenarbeit.
Round one, fight! A powerful roundhouse kicks at the same time. Now you're moving to the center of the ring. A lot of powerful punches to throw into this round. Oh! 8, 7, 6.
Yeah, we take care. We take care. Yes.
Gestern getan. Ich konnte mich heute dann bei insgesamt 3 Firmen noch einmal wirklich von der hohen Produktqualität und von dem hohen technologischen Standard überzeugen. Daimler-Benz ich fahre mit tiefen Eindrücken aus diesem Land. Wir haben eine gute Kooperation mit China. Es gibt aber auch einige Herausforderungen, die wir gemeinsam bestehen müssen. Es gibt vor allen Dingen Themen beim Wettbewerb. Es gibt hohe Kapazitäten aus China, die zum Teil auch für Europa mittlerweile ein Problem darstellen, weil es Kapazitäten sind, die weit über den Marktbedarf hinausgehen.
A lot of jabs and hooks. Punching in each other. One knee at the same time. Let's see if you can get up. 8, 7.
Ich hoffe, dass ich in meinen Gesprächen ein bisschen Verständnis dafür wecken konnte, dass die Staatsführung dieses Landes auch einen Beitrag dazu leisten sollte, den Krieg in der Ukraine zu beenden. Darüber habe ich gestern mit Staatspräsident Xi ausführlich gesprochen.
So there you go. And then Hempcar sent a news story of Amazon faces scrutiny after destroying laptops and tablets and books, right? And it's just, that they have extras that they've produced and they destroy them, right? Yeah, that is a great example, because if they just gave them away, people wouldn't buy them then, would they? Right? And the more laptops there are on the market, supply and demand, the lower the value is, right? So rather than just give those laptops away, they destroy them, right? There was an example of this more close to home here in New York City in Union Square. There was a department store, Burlington Coat Factory, was throwing away a whole bunch of excess coats they couldn't sell. And it was in the wintertime in the cold, but before they were throwing them away, they were cutting them up so that homeless people couldn't get them out of the garbage and wear them. Because again, then they wouldn't buy them, right? And that's the irrationality. Production, is organized for profit, right? And it's sellability, not usability, right? They didn't make those coats for people to wear them; they made coats for somebody to buy them, right? Production for profit, not for social use, right? So there you go. I think you're onto something there. But yeah. All right. Well, listen, folks, unless there's anything else that people would like me to talk about, why not? I'll give you all one last chance. If you have any final questions, you want to buy me a coffee, send me one last question. I'll put on some music and I'll give you all one last chance to send any questions that you might have. And if not, then we'll end it after this. So I'm going to put on some music. But before I do that, one last reminder, go to buymeacoffee.com and send any questions you got. All right. So what music am I going to put on? What music should I put on for this next part, right? Right. What music do I have readily available that I can put on that I haven't played on here like a million times, right? What music do I have? Looking through my computer for music that I could possibly put on. Could play the coal miner song, but I played that recently, so I can't do that. Right? Just scanning for what music I will put on. All right, we're going to put on the Chinese song, We Walk on a Great Road. Send me one final question. Send me buy me a coffee. Ask me a question. Here we go. Yep. Awesome stuff, folks. Awesome stuff. In that song, The Great Road, being a revolutionary, getting involved in the revolutionary movement is walking on the Great Road. And we talk about that in some of our books and our writing. In the Khrushchevism book and in some of our other stuff, we talk about walking on the Great Road. But you're not meant to walk on the Great Road alone, right? It is something you need comrades for, right? You need other people, right? And if you just read books about it or listen to podcasts about it, you won't get it, right? That you have to be involved in struggle. And none of this is meant to be an intellectual exercise. This is meant to be a movement. And we need you to join the movement. So join the Center for Political Innovation. We're going to be in the streets on Saturday all over this country to stop the danger of war against Iran. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. And we'll be back probably tomorrow night. I don't think I'll be on Saturday because I'll be with comrades. Maybe I'll be on Saturday. Depends what happens. But all right, everybody. So I'm going to put on the closing music and we're going to call it a night. Thank you. Thank you. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.